Hold up, I ain't trying to stump, man, but the Yeezys jumped over the jump, man. I be in and out of arenas like I'm Scottie Pippen.
Left my elbow in the pot, a la Vince Carter.
Bitch, you wasn't with me shooting in the gym?
James Harden with the range on me, nigga, way back. Coach, they won't knock me off my pivot, get it.
Been flowing stupid since Vince Carter was on some through the legs arm and a hoop shit.
And you can live through anything if magic made it.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, now you do.
Yes, sir. We are back. Round of applause for yourselves. This is your guy, Marcellus Ease, and we got the Kawhi Leonard situation on the docket for today, as we're going to get a full three-dimensional scope of what exactly is going on, and things are just playing out way bigger than Steve Ballmer and Kawhi Leonard. And I've always stated in my previous segments, the NBA is about 60% marketing, 30% business, and 10% basketball. So we're going to get right into it. Everything is going to be time-stamped. First, we're going to hear from Paul George about his contract negotiations, as now it sounds a lot different than when we first heard it, knowing the information about the potential cap circumvention. Then we're going to hear from Pablo Torre, as he spent 7 months investigating this whole situation. He gave great details on the dynamics of the contract with Steve Ballmer and Aspiration, as well as Kawhi Leonard and his unannounced sponsorship deal with the same company. And then we're going to hear from Steve Ballmer, as he uncharacteristically went all the way to Bristol, Connecticut at ESPN's headquarters. And when was the last time we ever heard of an NBA owner having a special broadcast interview at 11 o'clock Eastern? It's unheard of, and he cleared the air and dropped a few gems that only NBA business types would understand, as Ramona Shelburne did not press him on certain things, but we're going to get right into it. And finally, we'll cap this off with Pablo Torre speaking to Mark Cuban, as interesting enough, the previous Dallas Mavericks owner went at him on social media, and it brings a few things into light about Mark Cuban. Why would he insert himself into this whole situation? He stated he was contacted from Aspiration years prior, and in a way we could peel back the layers and look at that Dirk Nowitzki final contract in a different light. Again, there's a lot of things to tie into. We're going to get into a lot of the inner nuances that's going on with this whole fiasco. Adam Silver definitely has a huge conundrum in his hands. So to start this off, we got to go back and re-examine Paul George speaking about his contract negotiations with the Los Angeles Clippers back in the fall of 2023 and leading up to the spring of 2024, when he eventually left the team in free agency. Keep in mind, Kawhi Leonard joined the Clippers in 2019 in a package deal that involved them getting Paul George and going so hard as far as to giving away 5 first-round picks and SGA almost as a throw-in. That's how bad Steve Ballmer wanted to get Kawhi Leonard. Now, for those of you that are watching the visual version, as you can see on this timeline, in 2015, Steve Ballmer was investigated by the NBA with the DeAndre Jordan situation, in which he reneged going from the Dallas Mavericks and he returned right back to the Clippers. It was eventually found out that Steve Ballmer circumvented the cap by guaranteeing DeAndre a certain endorsement deal. And just to add a little more nuance with the acquisition of Kawhi Leonard in 2019, by him leaving Toronto, he sacrificed $50 million. And we all know Uncle Dennis and Kawhi don't really like to leave money on the table. So again, we're tying this all into Kawhi Leonard and Paul George being a package deal. And right here, we're going to hear from Paul George as he speaks on the fallout and him coming to the realization that that package deal was no longer the case. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
As it played out, though, like the first initial deal was, I thought, kind of disrespectful, right? And again, in all of this, no hard feelings, no love lost, no, like, it's a business, like you said. So the first initial deal was like 2 years, 60. So I'm like, whoa. 2 years, 60?
Hey, that's crazy, bro.
That's great.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
So I'm like,
Wow.
no, I'm not signing that. Like, now we're getting into the negotiating. Like, nah, I'm not taking that deal. And so they saying this, that, like, you know, we want you and Kawhi here long term. Like, we want y'all to be here, all of this stuff, right? So then, you know, as we're continuing to negotiate as the season goes on, and mind you, this was started before the season started. So this was kind of like, I could be wrong on actual timing, but this was maybe like October-ish, when negotiations first started, and it was 260. And as we kept going, it was like, you know, they would go up, you know, inches, to where it was like 44, 45, right? But this was like a couple months in between before we got it to 40 something. So I'm still like, nah, I'm not doing that. Then I hear wind of, like, you know, what they're going to give Kawhi.
Now, right there, he got wind of what they're going to give Kawhi. Remember, Paul George and Kawhi came as a package deal to the Clippers. What does Paul George really mean by that? Because again, this is the fall of 2023. Kawhi Leonard got that deal with Aspiration where they circumvented the cap. Well, it appears that they circumvented the cap, but he got that deal in 2022. So right here, once again, what does Paul George mean? We're going to listen to that one more time.
I'm still like, nah, I'm not doing that. Then I hear wind of, like, you know, what they're going to give Kawhi. So I'm like, just give me what Kawhi got. Like,
Right.
y'all view us the same. Like, you know, we came here together. We want to finish this shit together. I'll take what Kawhi got. Like, no
He was cool
problem.
with that.
I was cool with that. Like,
Wow.
and we.
Now, right there, what exactly does Paul George mean? I'll take what Kawhi got. Just know, as we'll get into it in the next segment, as we'll hear from Pablo Torre, Kawhi Leonard the year before, in 2022, got a $48 million deal from Aspiration, $28 million in cash over, I believe it was a 4-year span, and also $20 million in stock options in Aspiration. So it totaled out to be $48 million. So what exactly does Paul George mean when he says, let me get the same deal Kawhi got, knowing that they originally came to the Clippers as a package deal? For those of you, once again, that are watching this in the visual version, as you can see in this timeline, Steve Ballmer in 2017, just 2 years before he got Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, the city of Inglewood, California, granted Steve Ballmer the exclusive negotiating rights to the land that the arena would sit on. So major dollars were on the line just years prior. And as we could see with Luka getting traded to LA, when a franchise gets a guaranteed top 3 player in the league, and that top star guarantees a lot of commerce for the future, and it pushes a lot of deals through. All of a sudden, a new ownership group was interested in buying the Lakers, and they instantly pulled that trigger. Same thing for Steve Ballmer getting sponsors for that new arena.
Still taking less. We were taking less. Kawhi took less. I was like, if Kawhi gonna take less, I'm not gonna say I want more than Kawhi. Like, I'm not gonna, like, it's not about me being paid more than him. Like, I'm gonna take what he got. Y'all give him that, give me that. They didn't want to do that. So this was before the All-Star break. So I'm like, you know what? I don't want, like, let's not even have no more conversation. Like, let's just play this year out. Cause it was starting to get into like my mood. Now I'm, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to have that energy carry over into the team.
On the court.
So, cause I could see it starting to bleed a little bit into the team where I was just like disconnected. I didn't want to fuck with nobody. Like, I was kind of just, you know, kind of to myself a little bit. So I was like,
damn. Now this right here is interesting because we never really seen PG off his square like that. He's a pretty chill dude. The fact that he got into a mood where he didn't want to fuck with no one, you gotta wonder if he knew about that outside deal and it was rubbing him the wrong way. Steve Ballmer is the Jerry Jones of NBA owners now. He got the deepest pockets and there's a huge gap from the other owners for miles.
yeah, let's just let this shit play out. Let me get to the end of this year and we'll discuss this again. We'll pick up, you know, conversations again. So we do that, right? Season in, I finished healthy. 74 games played.
Yep,
and had one of my most efficient seasons. So now we go into negotiations. Now they bring it to 3 years.
Where we at?
150. So basically around what they gave Kawhi. So a part of me was still like, all right, that's cool. It sucks that it had to get to this point, like that we couldn't get this figured out a lot sooner. But
Way early, right?
now we at the end of the year, 3 years, 150. So I'm like, all right, like now we're in a ballpark. You know what I mean? Now we can have conversation here. And again, it still wasn't about the money, because when I went back to have the negotiation at the end of the year, I presented the 150 no trade. Because in the meeting, they're like, we want you here long term. We want to, when you're retired, we want you to be a Clippers for a lifetime, like all of this stuff. We want you to be here. We want you to be a Clippers your whole career. So I'm like, cool. Give me the 3 years, 150, no trade then. Like no trade clause. Then I'm taking less, but at least I know I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm committed to y'all. Like they didn't want to do the no trade.
Do that?
Wow.
So then now I'm like, all right, well then it only makes sense for me to do 4 years, 212, right?
Yeah.
Like at least pay me my money. If y'all gonna trade me, then y'all gonna trade me. They didn't want to do the no trade.
Do that?
Wow.
Now, as we continue on with this, and we'll get into the next segment, this no trade right here is going to be very, very pivotal, because we're going to find out that Kawhi Leonard's deal with Aspiration, the only way it could have got broken is if he got traded. So the real question right here, did Paul George know this? And did he have any outside negotiations with the Clippers? This is where all this stuff gets sticky, because Adam Silver's investigation doesn't necessarily have to be Steve Ballmer and Kawhi Leonard in Aspiration, whatever paperwork they can get. They could also speak to Paul George about his negotiations. And with him podcasting now entering that media space, this is where things get tricky. Now him speaking about how his negotiations went, the league now can take a look at it with a keen eye. Again, there was a clause in Kawhi Leonard's sponsorship deal with Aspiration where if he got traded, the deal would somehow be voided.
Now I'm like, all right, well then it only makes sense for me to do 4 years, 212, right?
Yeah.
Like at least pay me my money. If y'all gonna trade me, then y'all gonna trade me. But at least like now I'm not in a situation where I could have got more had I just gone to free agency, then take this deal and then y'all could just ship me wherever I want. And then now I'm on this deal that I didn't want.
Right.
So,
or AKA the other deal that Kawhi Leonard got, if they had any negotiations with Paul George on that type of deal, him knowing that it could get voided if he get traded. This is where the shit kind of gets sticky. We don't really know what he means right here.
You want to do that? So then I was like, now I'm open to entertaining what's out there. And then I mean, through the negotiations, they wasn't budging. They weren't gonna budge. I wasn't gonna budge. I thought I played well enough for them to, be like, you know what? He's a part of our future. Like, I thought I did that. I thought I earned that. Granted, we didn't win while I was there, but luck has a lot to do with that. We couldn't remain healthy as a unit. But I thought I did enough to earn that.
To earn that money.
They didn't want to do it. So it was just a stalemate. We came to a stale. At that point, it was like, man, I love Steve, I love Lawrence, but at that point, it didn't even feel right to come back with that type of energy and be comfortable playing back in LA.
What did Steve say to you?
I mean, it's taking his word. You know what I mean? In that situation, it's taking his word. Like, no, I don't want to trade you. That's not the reason I want to resign you, which I get, and I understand, and I don't know. Steve is a good dude. Like, I love Steve as an owner, one of the best owners that I played for. But it's a business. Like, I won't take nobody's word if they can't put it in writing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's business. Like, I wasn't. I was torn a little bit because of the I don't know, just the history we had this past 5 years. I owed Kawhi that conversation. I called him up and was just like, man, listen, I think I'm gonna go elsewhere. Like, conversations with the Clippers didn't go how I wanted to. kind of broke down how I told you guys how it all played out. You know, and we had that conversation, and I was like, man, like, I got to do what's best. And I mean, he understood. He like, I mean, go get your bag. Like, P, go get your bag. Like, you know, I can't even be mad at you. You know, so, you know, I thought, you know, and I look at Kawhi as one of my best friends in this league, you know, somebody that, you know, I fuck with. Like,
now that's interesting. Paul George acknowledging that Kawhi Leonard is someone that he really messes with as a good friend. And Kawhi telling him, go get your bag. Remember, they had these conversations a year after Kawhi Leonard allegedly got a $48 million endorsement deal from Aspiration. Again, we're looking at this with a keen eye, because does Paul George right here really mean him and Kawhi had the conversation because he wasn't getting that additional money? Or was Paul George left out in the dark? See, this could go really two ways. Paul George right now, after this information leaked with Kawhi Leonard and Aspiration, he could be looking at it like, damn, Kawhi, you even put me on. Or he could be looking at it as like, oh shit, I tried to get that deal. They didn't want to give it to me. Could the NBA and Adam Silver potentially investigate me? And for the most part, we could see within his negotiation with the Clippers, him being traded was really the discrepancy. And as we continue on into this segment, we're going to find out that Kawhi Leonard's sponsorship deal with Aspiration really couldn't be voided unless he got traded.
You know, our families, you know, love each other. You know, so it was tough to leave him, just with, you know, how much I enjoyed being out there with him. That was one of a big decision too, that weighed a lot on me, was just, damn, I'm leaving my boy, like leaving why. But I had to have that conversation with him. We talked, and, you know, he gave me his blessings of like, man, just, you know, go do what's best for you.
What happens when you are no longer a package deal? Remember, coming off that 2018-19 season, Paul George finished third in MVP voting. It's one of his best seasons of his career. And in that same summer, the Clippers were able to get him and Kawhi Leonard coming off that championship as a package deal. Also within that Paul George dynamic, that same summer that he left the team, Kawhi Leonard's deal involved a 15% trade kicker. So once again, all this was tied in to how Kawhi's secret sponsorship deal was structured. As we'll now hear from Pablo Torre, as he did a 7th-month investigation, getting the paperwork because Aspiration had went through a bankruptcy. So this is how all these things became available to the public. And Pablo even went as far as to getting some former employees to speak. This situation is getting real sticky. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
US or in the world?
In the world. What this episode needs is to begin with a couple of libs. What neither of you is, though, are the libs in question. Because these two libs I'm talking about are two actual, very prominent members of the Democratic Party named Andre Cherny and Joe Sandberg. These are two Harvard graduates.
Harvard. Crappy school.
Who successfully raised hundreds of millions of dollars with the help of some of the most famous people in the entire world. Because Andre and Joe co-founded a company that they named Aspiration. Andre Cherny and Joe Sandberg, basically assembled the celebrity Avengers of climate change to endorse Aspiration. Leonardo DiCaprio became an investor and advisory board member. May have heard of his work.
I have.
Drake invested and gave a statement to the likes of Rolling Stone saying, quote, Aspiration's approach to climate change is really inspiring. Orlando Bloom, Cindy Crawford.
It's a good one.
They found her.
Cindy Crawford's even more famous daughter.
Yeah, that's wild. I was just
Kaya
about to read
Gerber.
that. Yeah.
In there, I mean, even the former coach of the Los Angeles Clippers, Doc Rivers,
Well, you know.
invested. Aspiration wound up raising a total of $865 million.
No way.
It was valuated as, quote, a green bank at $2.3 billion in 2021 with the goal of going public.
Okay, I'm going to raise my hand. I know you're building very meticulously, but I'm gonna jump the line and ask the question. What the hell do they actually do? Like that's cool. I want to save the world. What do they actually do? What are these people investing in?
I mean, it's
print stuff.
It's such a good question. A question that they started to answer on various billboards all across America, because their slogan, if you ever saw one of these, was this: "Clean rich is the new filthy rich."
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh at our environment, but I can't tell if this is a joke or not.
Oh, the concept of investing with a conscience, David. This was super popular in 2020, 2021, as you may recall. The climate change movement, Donald Trump's first administration, it ending.
Mm-hmm.
These companies started embracing the environment, and companies wanted to be known as the good guys. This is a company of good guys. And Amin asked the relevant question, so what do the good guys here purport to do? Well, their business was kind of simple. For example, let's say, purely hypothetically, that you had 3,487 pages of documents.
Give or take.
And that added up to a single tree. Aspiration, what they did was offer to balance that out by arranging the planting of one tree in your name, replacing the tree that you killed. And here, Amin,
so old.
Here, Amin, is what Aspiration's co-founders, noted Harvard graduates, Andre Cherny and Joe Sandberg, understood. That trees, it turns out, are made of what element?
Carbon?
Carbon. What that means is you could plant trees to zero out not just 3,487 pages of documents, but pretty much any kind of carbon emission you wanted to offset. And turns out, lots of shit emits carbon. Drake's private jet activity. Plant some trees. Major League Baseball stadium operations. Quote, for the first time in its history, the Red Sox have affixed a sponsor name on the grass at Fenway Park. Through a partnership with Aspiration, their name will now be featured near the fungo circles on the grass between the warning track and the infield, end quote.
I have a tear in my eye because it's such horse hockey. We were a LEED certified ballpark, and all it means is you have to do things way more expensively.
Gold, silver?
We were the first ever retractable roof gold facility.
Wow.
It was really impressive. We got to do a press conference.
I did not know this.
That's pretty good.
We got to do everything.
For a stadium to be LEED gold
It was just a budget item. We just had to pay instruction, basically. You have to do it in a way that gets you the certification. You're with them at all times while you're killing trees and while you're emitting.
So you're just paying? That's all it takes?
That's all it is.
I thought it was you were going to tell me, oh yeah, like the roof is made out of a special material that actually generates.
Don't be ridiculous.
But I should clarify that things have gotten a lot more elaborate since then, because what Aspiration kind of figured out was they don't even need to do the planting of the trees themselves.
Outsource it?
What they did, Amin, to use a proper term, they brokered these sales of carbon credits. They were a brokerage for trees, which they also did, by the way, for Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, which also bought millions of carbon credits, meaning paid for the brokering of the planting of all of these trees. And brokering, you may ask yourself, what kind of a margin is there?
Yeah, that's where I was headed with this.
On the brokering business, typically, it costs about 10 to 20 cents to plant a tree, I'm told. Aspiration was charging the Red Sox and Meta and Drake $1.
Whew, that's nice. That's nice work if you can
Little
get it.
5X.
Yeah.
5 to 10X, depending.
You had me at hello.
But as for how Andre and Joe got the Red Sox and Meta and Iron Man and Drake and Leonardo DiCaprio, and also, this is not a joke, Bill and Hillary and the Clinton Foundation to care about meeting not some gold LEED certified blah, 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 but what they trademarked as the Aspiration Standard, TM. This is where I should note that Andre Cherny and Joe Sandberg were more than just members of the Democratic Party. Andre and Joe aspired to be major leaders of the Democratic Party. Amin, you live in Phoenix.
I do.
You may vaguely recall Andre Cherny as the former chair of the Arizona Democratic Party. Also,
what a time.
The youngest White House speechwriter in United States history, whose former boss personally endorsed him in a run for United States Congress.
Hello, this is President Bill Clinton. I'm calling to ask you to join me in supporting Andre Cherny for Congress. I've known Andre since he worked for me in the White House to improve education and to create new jobs. He's innovative, he's creative, so I trust him to get our economy going, and you should too.
I should note that Andre lost that congressional race in 2012. He then co-founded Aspiration the year after in 2013 with his friend, Joe Sandberg. The two of them had met at a Harvard networking event in D.C.
Of course.
Way back in 97, and I know this, unfortunately, because I read a whole story about this on the Harvard alumni website. But as of 2019, Joe Sandberg had gotten rich. He'd done private equity at Blackstone, was a founding investor in Blue Apron, the meal delivery company. He was even the subject of a splashy headline in the LA Times. Quote, "He made millions as an LA investor. Now he may run for president to fight poverty." As of March 2025, okay, now it's this year, just 6 months ago, there was another headline. This one happened to be from the Department of Justice. And it was written by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Central District of California. Quote, "Joseph Sandberg, co-founder of Aspiration Partners, arrested for conspiring to defraud an investment fund of at least $145 million.
Oh, God.
That isn't even what Pablo Torre finds out is here to investigate. Because what really happened that brought us to this table is that weeks after Joe Sandberg got arrested, Aspiration filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Shocker.
What I wanted to do was find Aspiration's bankruptcy filing. In this packet, there is a clue. And this clue was initially quite strange to me as just a sports journalist. But I believe that this clue may be of new interest to the DOJ and the FBI, as well, by the way, as the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission, all of whom have been investigating Aspiration in parallel to me. Because for all of the very famous celebrity Avengers who got paid by these politically ambitious bros to sell their genius billion-dollar company to the world, the guy who got Aspiration's most important and most revealing endorsement deal by far has never been identified by anyone in public until now.
Dun, dun, dun. Wait, you're telling me, of all the rich and famous people they paid to be part of this, to legitimize this, right? Iron Man, the guy from The Revenant, right? All these people, the guy from Degrassi High. Kwahi that's the apex? That is the highest paid celebrity endorser of this?
He was an investor, or he was actually a receiver of money?
Kawhi Leonard received money. It does feel important to establish what makes him him, right? Like what distinguishes him, from Drake and Iron Man and all of those celebrity Avengers that you referenced.
Oh, he's the worst personality ever. Like, it's in terms of you want someone outgoing and can sell something and be very vivacious and inspire a good, positive energy. That's not who he is. He's a very quiet, reserved guy. He doesn't really tend to go to the spotlight. Most of his commercials, he doesn't have a speaking role in.
The more that I hear Amin say the word quiet and talking about Kawhi, I'm like, his name is basically the adjective.
Yeah.
That was the summer of 2019. He and Serge Ibaka, they win the NBA title with the Raptors, and the courtship of prime Kawhi Leonard, the most sought-after free agent in professional basketball, begins. The Clippers losing SGA, all those picks, getting Kawhi and Paul George, that basically reshaped the modern NBA. But the second thing, which is related to that, is that according to multiple NBA executives that I interviewed, lots of not just fans, but executives were shocked, even suspicious, eyebrows fully raised, at how the once lowly Clippers had convinced Kawhi to choose them, especially over the Lakers, right? They were the most furious about all of this. All of the rumors, the conspiracies. You may recall that they centered around a mysterious relative who served as Kawhi Leonard's power broker.
Uncle Dennis.
And so in comes Uncle Dennis Robertson, who, and this is now 2019, according to The Athletic, was the center of these complaints by NBA teams about how the Clippers landed Kawhi Leonard. And they were so numerous, let's recall, that Adam Silver, the commissioner of the league, finally agreed to investigate them.
Now, the Uncle Dennis portion of this is going to come back to haunt Kawhi because historically, they've always been pressing for a lot more than just the initial payment that's coming out of that salary cap. The Spurs have history negotiating with them, and also the Raptors. And just going back to that point that Pablo had brought up, interesting to know that NBA executives were very suspicious that the Clippers landed Kawhi and Paul George, because let's remember, PG13 was coming off that MVP season and he just re-signed with the Oklahoma City Thunder. I mean, they did everything he wanted them to do. PG13 let it be known that in order for him to re-sign with the Thunder, he wanted Carmelo on the team. And the Thunder had went out and pursued him from the Knicks. So quite a few dynamics that are playing out there.
And the main focus was, in fact, whether Uncle Dennis had requested improper benefits from NBA teams in exchange for Kawhi Leonard, these secret sweeteners. And the most notable sweetener, as sources told Sam Amick of The Athletic, it was, quote, a guaranteed amount of off-court endorsement money that they could expect if Kawhi Leonard played for their team, end quote. And this, David, is a serious violation of NBA rules. Why?
Because there's a salary cap for a reason that's been collectively bargained. And what you have to do for a level playing field is you cannot have any circumvention of that cap. So you're not allowed to give players anything. It all counts. So you can't give them plane tickets. You can't pay the college education of their brothers, sisters, friends. You can't give them cars. You can offer in the contract that's available for public use, like a suite on the road, but they have to pay. Or you can
that's what I was going to say. Tickets is
out.
The tickets is probably the easiest example for people to understand. If you've seen NBA players with family members who sit courtside, for instance, let's say John Morant and his father, the team is not offering that for free to John Morant. He is paying face value on those tickets for his father every game.
And just sort of like the philosophy behind the salary cap for people who just aren't familiar with it, this is important because it does what?
It stops the richest owner in the world from being able to do things that the poorest of the rich owners can't do. So there are certain owners, think about this, if you're an owner who makes private planes for a living and you just give a private plane to your player just for S's and G's, that's something that a guy who buys a team who runs a corner, family drugstore wouldn't be able to do.
This is now where we can connect some of the dots. Officially. So Kawhi was only allowed to sign a 3-year, $103 million max contract, which he did, of course. But the big alleged conspiracy, the one that got everybody's eyebrows raised, if you're an executive across the NBA, was that cost-conscious, frugal Kawhi Leonard and his Uncle Dennis had apparently found the perfect franchise with an ideal owner who would be happy to give them the illicit sweeteners they demanded, and an owner who, as Amin described, just happened to be the richest sports owner in the world with a current net worth of $175 billion, making him, yes, the 6th richest person in the world, who also happened to be the hyper-competitive former CEO of Microsoft, which also meant that he was still kind of just getting used to the socialist cap that David described that limited his NBA spending power. And Steve Ballmer himself happened to explain all of this to the Acquired podcast in June of this year.
We do have a union. That's very different. What that means in terms of the complexity through the collective bargaining agreement, it also covers things like what's max salary, what trades can you make, all that, very different. You really are business partners with your competitors. That's sort of different. I mean, you actually get together and talk to them. I never did that when I was at Microsoft.
And I want to clarify, in fairness to Steve Ballmer, that no evidence of illicit payment to Kawhi Leonard was ever found, apparently, right? Kawhi re-upped with the Clippers in August of 2021, before the season, then again last year, another extension. And The Athletic ultimately reported about the NBA's investigation, quote, while sources with knowledge of the investigation said no evidence was found indicating that the Clippers had granted any of the lavish requests, the underlying message coming from Commissioner Adam Silver remains. He sees salary cap circumvention as a cardinal sin in the NBA and will always keep a watchful eye on that front. If any relevant evidence of improper benefits surfaces in the future, the league will reopen the investigation and pursue the charges yet again.
So once again, the NBA had investigated Steve Ballmer in 2015 with the DeAndre Jordan situation, and with them acquiring Kawhi Leonard in 2019, they were investigated once again.
The threat of suspension for executives was openly discussed, as was the potential for a loss of draft picks or even the voiding of player contracts as the most extreme of measures, end quote. So this is where I just got to set the stage here. Because so far we've been telling two parallel stories, much like two parallel towers of papers. And what we know is that NBA executives were suspicious of how Steve Ballmer's Clippers landed the most valuable free agent on the market, Kawhi Leonard. That the NBA did not find that Ballmer got Kawhi by sweetening their offer. But also that in March 2025, this celebrity-endorsed, multi-billion-dollar, allegedly fraudulent tree brokerage named Aspiration, which promises to clear your conscience and your emissions, they file for bankruptcy. And this is where the clue is. What David's looking at with his glasses on is a bankruptcy filing, and there's a list of creditors. The entities to which Aspiration, in all of their alleged fraudulence, still owes the most money. And what I noticed is what David is noticing right now, which is that on that list of creditors, up near the top, above the Boston Red Sox, is an LLC. A tiny little company that Aspiration owes $7 million. And that LLC's name, David, is what?
KL2 Aspire LLC.
Damn, Uncle Dennis could have... Uncle Dennis could have at least switch up the name? KL2 Aspire LLC. Yeah, they were in a rush to get that money, boy.
What I did next was pull the publicly accessible paperwork that KL2 Aspire LLC filed with California's Secretary of State, which happens to be the first document in front of you, Amin.
Okay.
And what does it list there under manager or member name?
Kawhi Leonard.
Whose NBA jersey number, just to connect all of the dots here, happens to be what?
Number 2.
So then the question is, the Aspire part of KL2 Aspire LLC, right? Because, okay, he's getting all this money, millions of dollars. What I started doing was scour the internet for any mentions of Aspiration. Any appearances, tweets, quotes, Instagram posts, anything by Kawhi Leonard endorsing Aspiration. And this was hard to find, which also might seem weird, right? Because every other celebrity Aspiration gave money to was well known. There was Drake offering a statement to Rolling Stone. There was Doc Rivers, Kawhi's own head coach. Robert Downey Jr. was cutting his commercial. That was the whole point of paying the A-list Avengers. But the grand total number of times that I found Kawhi Leonard ever publicly referencing Aspiration was this.
Ultimately, 0.
0.
Now that right there is a red flag. And that's a lot of money too. $28 million for 4 years, unannounced, very suspicious. Again, a lot of the history with Uncle Dennis trying to shake down teams is going to come back to haunt them. And ever since Kawhi has joined the Clippers, they've been getting shaken down by a few people around Kawhi. Johnny Wilkes, a friend of Uncle Dennis, he tried to sue Jerry West back in 2020 about a couple of outside deals that they arranged. And him and the Clippers have been through multiple appeals and dismissals from the courts. Also, a former workout coach of Kawhi's from his college, San Diego State, has sued the Clippers about owing them some money for getting Kawhi to stay on the team, and that's an ongoing investigation.
0 times
Right.
Kawhi Leonard mentioned Aspiration. And so what I started doing was reaching out to dozens of former Aspiration employees. And I was looking for any information about KL2 Aspire LLC. And what happened was a grand total of 7 of them ultimately agreed to interviews, which is also how I have exclusively obtained the next sheaf of papers in front of you both to turn over. David, please go first. Can you please read what this signed and executed document says?
This endorsement agreement is effective as of April 1, 2022, the effective date, between KL2 Aspire LLC and Aspiration Partners, with a principal place of business in Marina del Rey, California.
Whereas Kawhi Leonard is a professional basketball player in the National Basketball Association, NBA, currently on the roster of the Los Angeles Clippers team. Whereas company desires that KL2 cause Leonard to provide the services of, to promote and market company as more particularly set forth herein.
In consideration of the rights and benefits granted to company hereunder, the company will pay KL2, which is Kawhi, $28 million in cash during the term of this agreement. Company will pay KL2 $7 million each year of the term.
That is Kawhi Leonard's autograph, right next to Andre Cherny, the CEO's autograph, youngest speechwriter in White House history.
Now, for those of you that are watching the visual version, as you can see here, if you look at the date, April 5th of 2022. As we heard earlier from Paul George, his negotiations took place in the fall of 2023, and it continued all the way up into the spring of 2024. So was PG13 made aware of this kind of deal? And when he was talking about, hey, I was trying to get the same deal Kawhi got, was it really in reference to this?
Next to the Clippers franchise player. But as for the listed address, for where any and all legal notices for Kawhi Leonard will be sent, what does that say there?
KL2 Aspire LLC, care of Dennis Robertson.
Damn, Uncle Dennis's name is on the fucking paperwork. Damn. Woo-wee. That shit's gonna come back to bite them in the ass right there.
And Uncle Dennis is also listed elsewhere in this contract, by the way, as his nephew's designated representative. And so this is where I just need to mention that on account of the multiple ongoing federal investigations into Aspiration, all the former employees I talked to were very afraid, understandably, to go on tape. But eventually, toward the end of my investigation, I convinced one very important person who worked in the finance department of Aspiration to go on tape, provided we could modulate their voice.
Wow.
Which felt fair. Do you remember the first time that you discovered Kawhi Leonard's endorsement agreement with Aspiration?
Oh, it was within the first 30 days of my employment with the company. And I didn't so much as discover it as I was told about it.
What was your reaction? What were you told?
My reaction was, what the fuck? And I was told, like, oh, these are the major contracts and the major players you really need to be aware of. And we went through a litany of, really, really top tier name contracts. And then, oh, by the way, we also have a marketing deal with Kawhi Leonard, a $28 million organic marketing sponsorship deal with Kawhi. And that if I had any questions about it, essentially don't, because it was to circumvent the salary cap, LOL. There was lots of LOL when things were shared.
Among the endorsement agreements that these famous people, these celebrities were signing with Aspiration, where did the size of Kawhi Leonard's agreement, the $28 million over 4 years, where did that rank?
The single largest sponsorship deal that Aspiration ever made. It completely eclipsed every other agreement. Completely eclipsed it. So every other celebrity endorsement combined would not have met even a quarter of Kawhi Leonard's endorsement.
That's kind of crazy. That includes Drake, Leonardo DiCaprio. Pretty much every other celebrity that was on that list, they have way better personalities than Kawhi. So the fact that that deal was never announced, it's going to raise a lot of suspicion. See, Ballmer's going to have one hell of a pair of tap dancing shoes to get out of this.
So that's including Leonardo DiCaprio and Drake and Robert Downey Jr. and Cindy Crawford and everybody else. Did you ever see proof of Kawhi Leonard marketing or endorsing Aspiration in any way?
Never, not once. The single largest payment to an individual for marketing that Aspiration ever made has completely evaded all press. It's honestly incredible. And it was a very strong pain point for our marketing team. And honestly, altruistically, their job is to get Aspiration's name out there. They don't understand why the largest part of their budget that they've actually blown is not delivering.
I should say that we here at Pablo Torre Finds Out attempted to reach out to Kawhi Leonard through the Clippers, through his agent, and through his Uncle Dennis, of course, with interview requests followed by detailed questions. But Kawhi's personal team did not respond before our deadline. The Clippers, however, provided a statement on behalf of the organization and owner Steve Ballmer, which reads in part, quote, "Neither Mr. Ballmer nor the Clippers circumvented the salary cap or engaged in any misconduct related to Aspiration. Any contrary assertion is provably false," end quote.
Now pay attention to the wording right there, because even Steve Ballmer, later on when we see his interview, he kind of spoke in these type of terms because legally there is no paperwork that's going to link Steve Ballmer giving Kawhi this money. More than likely, they could receive penalties from the league with the illusion or the assertion of collusion, but there's nothing legally that's going to bind them and be 100% proven.
What's even crazier is that as you comb through it, as you were just attempting to do, what becomes clear is that this is how this $28 million deal, this thing that he never did anything for, was designed. I'm no expert, but the language seems to indicate that he actually, contractually, didn't have to do anything?
Nothing. He didn't have to do anything. There was a clause for an out in every single KPI. So they weren't actually key performance indicators, KPIs. They were, if you feel as though this is something that doesn't align with you, or it's too big of an ask, or maybe you don't want to post on social media, maybe you don't want to wear our gear, just let us know. Or you don't have to let us know, you just don't have to do it.
There's section 3.2, obligations of KL2. That is the heading. Section 3.2, part 4. KL2 may decline to proceed with any action desired by the company under section 3.2, which is the whole section where everything is, all the stuff that he would have to do, if Leonard believes that such proposed actions are not consistent with his beliefs.
Once again, a billionaire like Steve Ballmer with those type of deep pockets, he has teams of lawyers that understand contract language, which we're starting to see. It's going to be hard to tie him fully into this with 100% proof.
And then part 5, right after that, KL2 shall have the exclusive right to control and approve all content and distribution for commercial, non-commercial, or lawful purpose, bearing the athlete endorsements or approved Leonard IP.
And no one in Aspiration had this veto power outside of Kawhi Leonard.
Which is to say that when you look at this, your examination of this indicates that the power dynamic is actually reversed here. That
Exactly.
The client, Kawhi Leonard, seems to be dictating the terms to the company Aspiration.
Correct.
In other words, Kawhi Leonard got from Aspiration a $28 million no-show job.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm honestly so jealous.
I guarantee you LeBron James's contract is nowhere near that with Nike or any other athlete the NBA or any other sport has that has a major endorsement. A lot of these red flags is really what's going to get Steve Ballmer caught up, but the penalties are not going to be crazy because he already checkmated the NBA by owning the land. Regardless if he owns a team or not, the league is going to have to cut him a check. He got prime real estate in LA right there in Inglewood. We're talking about Ballmer already lining himself up to get checks from the Olympics when they come into town, even FIFA with the World Cup coming to North America. The games are not necessarily going to get held in the stadium, but the stadium could serve as a facility for players to practice, etc. And it's almost as if he's double dipping because not only he gets paid from the arena in which he controls, he also collects another payment because he owns the land. Me, myself, when I was in NYC, the organization I work for, they own the land to one of the famous buildings in the city. And the amount of money they made just from owning the land every year is almost enough to buy an NBA team.
So jealous. I mean, he's got the dream. Like, it's within my beliefs to be paid $28 million and do absolutely all as well.
It's incredible. It's literally written so he can never be in breach.
If it's not consistent with his beliefs, David, he doesn't have to do it.
I'm sweating a little bit because I want to understand exactly what the deliverables were and to see whether or not there's opportunity for him to actually get the $28 million without ever allowing them to do anything with his name associated. So
Page 13.
I've done a lot of these.
Oh, that's why you're here.
Oh.
David Sampson, architect of many sponsorship endorsement agreements, is now looking through with his lil glasses.
So here's something he has to do. If requested by the company, KL2 shall cause Leonard to be available to sign 50 items.
Jesus Christ.
The signing deals we do, it's like 1,500 items. And it's not 7 million.
If requested.
50, if requested. It shall cause KL2, meaning Kawhi, shall cause Kawhi to be available and to work with team or Leonard's content creators to provide a minimum of 1 photo per month to Aspiration for their usage during the NBA season.
What's 1 photo per month mean?
Well, the point is he did 0 photos per month. So.
But I said,
wait, there's more.
If requested, okay.
This is better. He has to be available, Kawhi does, for $28 million to participate in 5 organic comments, which could be a like or a retweet.
You may wonder how many likes and retweets did he give?
Is it 0?
Of course it's 0.
Oh my God.
He did nothing. He literally did nothing.
And
as far as we could tell. And my source has confirmed, as well as the other 6 sources I spoke to have confirmed.
Did nothing and yet not in breach of contract.
My man Kawhi was probably on there liking OnlyFans. OnlyFans models instead, man. He's still gonna collect that fucking check.
That's the amazing part.
That's the dream.
Right?
That's the
it's like I did nothing wrong, basically, according to this contract.
He does have to do something that's major here.
What is that?
That Leonard has to be available and participate with company to create an annual program in support of the company's reforestation program with a tie to calculating Leonard's carbon footprint given his annual schedule, events, and travel. Boy, I'd love to see that.
Well, it's hard because it didn't happen.
I thought you were going to say that was the one thing he did do.
As David continues to comb
I'm
through
also
this.
looking at the definitions because I want to make sure here.
Oh, I knew that he would. He's like a pig in shit right now.
this-
Like, you give me a
wallowing.
secret contract that I can pick apart.
What we heard just before about that any deliverable, it's that such proposed actions are not consistent with his beliefs. He doesn't have to do it. And I'm looking in the defined terms, assuming these are all the defined
beliefs?
terms. I'm looking for beliefs.
It is not defined.
So therefore, there is no actual anything in this contract. Now, I've been reading it only for a couple of minutes. This is in real time. But if you've got a qualifier there, which allows you to get out of any of your obligations with something as ephemeral as not consistent with his beliefs without a definition, because beliefs is a small b. I was looking for beliefs with a big B, which would make it a defined term, where you have to say, hey, I don't believe in working on Saturdays, or I don't believe in supporting pig meat because I'm a vegan.
Right.
So you
Big
can
baller
have that
beliefs.
in contracts, that you will not endorse something that goes against your beliefs, but it's a small b, and there's no defined term.
He might small b believe in not doing anything.
Yeah, it's against my beliefs to do this.
David?
I'm trying to come to grips with 2.10b here. And I'm sorry, but this is a major provision in the contract that
Please share.
I'm not used to seeing. It's called termination. It's when would an agreement be terminated? So when can they say, you know what, we're not paying you?
Now, this part right here is what's going to tie in to what Paul George was talking about, where he kept emphasizing the no trade clause or just being traded in general. We have to look at him talking about that with a keen eye. David Sampson's about to explain how Kawhi Leonard's outside endorsement deal could be terminated if he got traded.
And normally there would be provisions for termination if you're a felon, if you're convicted of a felony, sometimes if you're just arrested for a felony, if you do anything for disparagement, if you bring bad juju upon the company, it can trigger a termination. This termination, and it's a termination for cause, which
This is in the Aspiration endorsement deal.
this is in his $28 million endorsement deal. Termination for cause if Leonard is no longer an employee of the team for any reason, and the team, capital T, is defined as the Clippers.
Yes.
So an endorsement deal that a company does with a player is usually you don't always get the rights to their marks.
Right.
So it's like blank uniforms.
Yep.
And so it doesn't matter whether the player is playing for the Clippers or not. But in this agreement, it's a termination for cause if he's not an employee of the team.
That's another giveaway that this is a outside circumvention with the cap, man. Jesus Christ. Again, a lot of this is under the illusion of assumption, but there's nothing legally that can tie Ballmer of just giving Kawhi money in his hand outside of the cap.
For avoidance of doubt, which is what you say in a contract, we want to make sure nobody screws it up. If Leonard is still being paid by the capital T team, but is a member of another NBA organization or has retired, either of those instances are a triggering event for termination by the company.
So an example of that is if Kawhi Leonard got bought out by the Clippers and then ends up signing with the Knicks. Technically, the Clippers are still paying him the remaining amount, but he is an employee of the New York Knicks now. And what that contract is saying very clearly, very bluntly, we're just going to tackle this right now in writing. If that happens, it triggers the termination clause.
I love that David just found that.
I can't believe that Kawhi Leonard, that anyone would ask for that or agree to it if it were not.
It seems to be, perhaps, one of the things in this otherwise very laissez-faire approach to what you got to do that the Clippers found, you might presume, quite important.
Just be on the Clippers.
It makes a lot of sense because Kawhi's recent extension has a 15% trade kicker. Just in case by some miracle the Clippers quickly get rid of him, that at least he can make up for some of the money that he has lost with that outside deal. Because remember, this outside endorsement deal started in 2022 and it's for 4 years. So it will last until 2026, April of 2026 to be exact. So Kawhi Leonard in his 2024 extension, he got a 15% trade kicker in case he was somehow not part of the team, because that would be his last 2 years under that outside endorsement deal with Aspiration. So he protected his ass just in case by some miracle in 2025, 2026, he wasn't on the Clippers.
Let's put this as bluntly as possible. So, to be clear, Kawhi can not post anything, can never like or retweet anything, can not sign the balls, right? Cannot do the photo op.
The reforestation program.
Not show up for any events. But his ass better be a Clipper throughout all of that. That's the thing that would jeopardize the $28 million.
I had to reread it before bringing it up to you two because it can't be. But it is.
It is signed and executed under those terms. And so what all this led me to do, is get back to sports, right? Because what I was curious about was, okay, so we have all these documents about the $28 million for the no-show job. I wanted to put that against the timeline of his contract extensions with the Clippers. Because Kawhi Leonard signed his first extension in August 2021, before that season. The month after that, it turns out, Steve Ballmer, this is September, broke ground on the Intuit Dome. Now, this is, David, the most expensive NBA arena ever constructed, his grand creation. And though Kawhi was still out recovering, you might remember the right knee injury.
Yes.
He did show up for that.
That wasn't actual digging for the stadium.
It's totally ridiculous.
All right, guys, get to work.
You bring in a bunch of dirt and you just get
Oh,
shovels.
that's not the actual ground?
No, it's not even on the ground. Kawhi looks like he's coming back from the gym.
It's the combination that always bothers
Everyone else is wearing like slacks and suits and all that stuff, and Kawhi just like popped in hoodie and shorts. But speaking of digging, I want to go back to the coverage of the extension that Kawhi signed just weeks before that scene. Right? Because before those shovels went into the ground, you may recall that he signs this 4-year, $176.3 million extension. And you may recall also that something didn't quite add up at the time. According to The Ringer, you may turn over the next page and read the highlighted passage.
That Kawhi Leonard officially returned to the Clippers on Thursday came as no surprise. What has provoked some head scratching, though, is the structure of the contract he decided to ink. How perfectly Kawhi, even when there's no mystery, there's a little bit of mystery.
And this was because Kawhi Leonard, as you continue to read through this, essentially did the Clippers what appears to be a favor. So here we have this notably frugal superstar who is complaining about the Wingstop coupons level frugal, and he did not do what everyone expected him to do, given that, which was sign the shortest or the longest possible deal in order to maximize his earnings. Instead, to the surprise of many NBA insiders, Kawhi Leonard very helpfully opted for a middle ground. And I just want to acknowledge here that the timing of Kawhi's extension from 2021 does not align super neatly with the paperwork on his $28 million aspiration endorsement deal, David, because that took effect when again? When did it say that on the?
Right in the start, April 1 of 2022.
But now, Amin, what I would like you to do is turn over the page after that. So that's the first type of document you may recall that you ever looked at. This is the original registration for KL2 Aspire LLC that got filed with the state of California, establishing an LLC whose name indicates that it was entirely created to take money from Aspiration. It says f***ing Aspire in the title. Look at the top of that piece of paper under file date.
November 22nd, 2021.
That's the same month that they started building that new arena. So it looks like my man Uncle Dennis was already in a hurry to get his money, setting things up 5 months earlier before the official deal began. And later on in this segment, we'll hear from Steve Ballmer as he spoke about how he introduced Kawhi in November of 2021 to Aspiration.
We're now right there at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, the beginning of that season, when he signs the extension, when the ground is broken, and this LLC, KL2 Aspire LLC, gets registered with the state of California. And now we're getting, guys, to the thing we have not yet established about the fall of 2021 when it comes to the once unsolvable question of salary cap circumvention in the NBA, which is the direct financial relationship between Aspiration on the one hand and Steve Ballmer and his Clippers on the other. But the people who know Steve Ballmer, what they say is that there is no product Steve Ballmer cares about more, down to the tiniest little detail, than the NBA team he purchased from noted racist Donald Sterling back in 2014. And this was evidenced, by the arena that Ballmer admirably spent billions of his own money designing in his own image.
They have sensors in the seats that measure how loud each section is. And so routinely they'll come up and say, this was the loudest section in that last segment of play. Everyone gets free t-shirts or free stuff.
The level of microscopic detail that Steve Ballmer cared about, the sensors, the toilets, everything, it all is to say that when it came to picking the company whose patch would get stitched onto every Clippers jersey and whose signage would adorn the back of every courtside seat, Steve Ballmer handpicked Aspiration to become the first founding partner of the Intuit Dome.
So notice how Steve Ballmer's hands is in every aspect of this, and he's very detail-oriented. But yet, when he's questioned about the details of his Aspiration deal, he's very nonchalant. And we'll see this later on. Just keep this in mind.
The first arena to become 100% carbon neutral from day one. The, quote, most sustainable arena in the world, end quote. And the Clippers announced this at Media Day in September 2021 with Steve Ballmer sitting right next to noted Clippers and Martin Luther King fan Joe Sandberg.
There are a few people in the business world and in the sports world that I admire as much as Steve Ballmer. This is a true visionary and an original thinker, and those are rare and few and far between in this day and age. But it's visionaries and original thinkers who change the course of history. And we're partnered with Steve and the Clippers to change the course of Los Angeles sports history and all global sports history, which is turning sports into a tool to fight the climate crisis. So Aspiration, in partnership with the Clippers, will be delivering tools to all Clippers fans to make their experience watching the Clippers carbon neutral and even carbon negative, so that your choice of being a Clippers fan isn't just a choice of who you root for, but it's an expression of what you believe.
Once again, beliefs are quite instrumental here. As proclaimed in a headline on NBA.com.
LA Clippers and Aspiration set a new standard for social responsibility in sports.
Or, as CNBC put it, David,
LA Clippers signed $300 million plus arena sponsorship deal with Green Bank Aspiration.
Just listen to Steve Ballmer himself while sitting next to Joe Sandberg at Media Day.
The pièce de résistance as we went through this
is when we had a chance to really sit down and meet the folks from Aspiration, to have our first founding partner be a company that focuses in on providing services to consumers and businesses to reduce or even go negative on their own carbon footprints was a great thing, particularly
Aspiration agreed to pay the Clippers that staggering amount, more than $300 million, over 23 years.
Now, I assume you don't have that agreement, although you've got 4,000 pages and 25,000
that might be in there, honestly.
And I keep turning things over. But
again, David, let's put this in perspective.
That's a naming rights deal.
That's a naming rights deal, but usually what do you get in a naming rights deal?
The name.
The name.
If they have founding partners, you get special places in your ballpark, in your arena, where they're called pillar sponsors.
Oh, but they got the patch. They were going to get the patch. Look at the back of the courtside seat behind another Marvel superhero, Simu Liu. Aspiration's right there. And this is where I just got to point out that the tower of documents we have been sort of like gazing at over here, it's actually different from the documents we have already examined. These 3,445 unpublished documents that I've obtained from inside of Aspiration, they range from bank statements to signed contracts to fancy pitch decks to internal emails. And what they do is they speak to Steve Ballmer's personal influence and awareness of the inner workings of this green bank that is now under federal investigation for an allegedly massive fraud. So, David, the next sheet of paper you can turn over is an internal email about partnership opportunities in sports and entertainment sent by Joe Sandberg to his fellow co-founder, Andre Cherny, and another Aspiration executive on October 29th, 2021.
Ballmer himself is enthusiastic to help and will personally be a reference and advocate where we ask him. So please keep that front of mind.
And then, if you will, there's an email on November 1st, 2021 from Steve Ballmer, personally connecting the CEO of Intuit with Andre and Joe.
Since Intuit and Aspiration already have a business relationship and all of us share a passion for the Clips and our Intuit Dome project, I thought it might be fun for the four of us to take in a game together sometime soon.
Wow. With this bankruptcy and all the emails getting out, is showing the close relationship Ballmer had with Aspiration. So as we continue on later in this segment, we'll see him kind of throw his hands up as far as knowing the details and just the overall background of Aspiration, which is very ironic. And the real question is, how is the NBA really going to react to this? Because they need Steve Ballmer. He's actually increased the standards of NBA teams, not only buying the team for an inflated price back in the 2010s, he actually now has changed the standards, which some owners may be uncomfortable with, but he changed this exact standard, which doesn't get talked about too much. He didn't ask for taxpayer money in order to finance that stadium. That's a new standard that owners don't necessarily want it to be the norm. The NFL owners are in unison with this. Even though they make way more money, they do not want it to be the norm that they don't collect taxpayer money to fund these stadiums. Steve Ballmer funding everything himself and just kind of owning the whole ecosystem so much that he actually sold the forum in order to avoid any type of antitrust activity that's going on over there down in Inglewood. He just has that much control.
To which Joe Sandberg replies that same day, David?
This is to Steve Ballmer from Joe Sandberg. Steve, thank you and you're right. Looking forward to our spending time together. Andre and I admire Intuit's commitment to sustainability and your smart partnership with the Clippers! Exclamation point. Go Clippers! Exclamation point.
Less than a month after that exchange.
Just 3 months after the signing of the extension.
Kawhi Leonard and Uncle Dennis registered KL to Aspire LLC. Now, less than a month after that, December 2021, it was announced that Steve Ballmer, who is again hailed as the very best investor of the last 20 years, joined Oaktree Capital Management in investing a total of $315 million into Aspiration, which was subsequently valued at $2.3 billion. So this is how my source characterized the mood around the company at the time.
Aspiration was in a great place at that time. Finances, listen, let's go have a pizza party every day. It was looking great. But if you peel back the layers of the onion a little bit more, you see that that money was spent quite quickly.
So according to contracts and emails that I obtained, $50 million, $50 million of this money came from Ballmer's personal LLC.
Now, for those of you that are looking at the visual version, as you can see, the $50 million, eventually we'll find out that there was an additional $20 million that was owed to Kawhi Leonard in stock options, which would make his total endorsement $48 million. And that extra $2 million is left over. It could be a commission cut for the middleman company to facilitate that type of transaction.
And that LLC, by the way, is named Pol Pot. Not
Pol Pot.
Not Pol Pot, the brutal Cambodian dictator, but Pol Pot. How dare you make that mistake? And according to all 7 former Aspiration employees I spoke to, that enormous infusion of money from Steve Ballmer, $50 million, is what allowed the allegedly fraudulent Green Bank to quite eagerly pay Kawhi Leonard $28 million for an alleged no-show job.
The source says in there that the money was spent very quickly. Some might say the money was spent before it even got there because it was just the clearinghouse.
Better not.
Now, Amino Hassett, he's always on point, man. Low-key, Amino Hassett is always on point. For some of you that are not in the know, a clearinghouse in the business world is basically just a middleman that makes sure a financial transaction goes through between 2 different parties. A prime example I can give of this is when Elon Musk purchased Twitter. I believe the price was over $40 billion. So picture a temporary LLC that comes in and makes sure that that transaction goes through smooth between both parties. Amino Hassett right here is alluding that that was Aspiration's real job in this whole Clipper endeavor.
The source says in there that the money was spent very quickly. Some might say the money was spent before it even got there because it was just the clearinghouse.
Better not say that.
Some would say.
Because if you're saying that, then an investigation has to follow. And if there is any thread where money's invested into Aspiration and then is out the door to Kwahi by the transitive property of flow of funds, it went right from Ballmer to Leonard.
The term that my sources called this arrangement, which again, neither Aspiration nor the Clippers nor Kawhi Leonard ever announced, despite the tonnage of announcements that they were making all the time, was, quote, sweetener. And this is a term that originates from the next email in front of you, Amin, sent by Joe Sandberg amid a much longer argument with one of his business partners, because a very defensive Sandberg was trying to preempt the idea that Ballmer, not unlike Kawhi with the Clippers, embraced Aspiration for any other alleged reason.
So this is an email to quite a few people. There's a lot of people on the CC line, but the relevant portion. What you're implying is that Ballmer's investment was a sweetener, and impure when the math above pretty blatantly contradicts your implication.
Now, Ballmer said that that investment was for his initial percentage of ownership, which is under 5%. And the reason why it being under 5% is very important here, because if he owned more than 5% of Aspiration, under the NBA's rules with owners, it's going to be a conflict of interest of why Aspiration, a company that he owns more than 5% of, is giving money to Kawhi.
In conclusion, it really pisses me off.
So that is Joe Sandberg, who would be arrested by the federal government. And I took all of this, all that stuff in that email, to my source.
Joe is the one who brings up a sweetener, and Joe is the one who brings up the impurity of the contract.
The way it reads is that, like, Joe Sandberg was almost like waiting for someone at some point to accuse him of something.
He is the first person to bring it to the conversation in writing and not offline either. So in an attempt to cover his tracks, he actually opens up the door to conversation in question.
It does seem very clear that the people inside of Aspiration loved to email each other.
Yeah, that's stupid idiots. Quite frankly. Yeah, let's put it in writing. Great idea.
I should say that we reached out to Joe Sandberg, who declined to comment through an attorney. But the thing about the bet that Steve Ballmer made on Aspiration, the problem came in 2022. So this is when the wheels of Aspiration began to fall off. So they'd acquired all these celebrity endorsements, right? But not enough actual business. That's unfortunately the story of this company. And in October 2022, Aspiration began advertising even in a pitch deck for investors that I obtained that it had a new customer to help compensate for the lack of business. The new customer was Qatar, the country. Qatar.
It's always a good way to
Qatar,
bail out.
according to this pitch deck, had hired Aspiration to zero out the carbon footprint of the 2022 World Cup.
Yes, of course.
Of course, according to my 7 sources, this was not true. So the point being that they were flailing, the cash was draining out, on the road to bankruptcy, and Aspiration, despite all of this, had a top priority in October 2022 internally, per my 7 sources, and that was incredibly clear.
There were weekly meetings about who was going to get paid what and when. And during those weekly meetings, Kawhi Leonard's contract was always set to be paid.
Even in a time of total financial hardship for the company, why?
There were multiple reasons we were given. One being that Kawhi's uncle was calling.
Wait, this is Uncle Dennis.
Uncle Dennis. Uncle Dennis was calling, and Uncle Dennis demanded payment. It was priority one. Like, it was something that had to be done.
Damn, my man Uncle Dennis does not play when it comes to his money.
It was crucial to our relationships with Ballmer and the Clippers.
Just call it about his coupons. Uncle Dennis was like, where's the Wingstop?
Oh, this ain't coupons.
Obviously, the stakes are much, much higher, but it's the same general principle that this is a guy who wouldn't let coupons go. He damn sure ain't gonna let $7 million go.
Bingo. I tried to ask Uncle Dennis himself about this via email and phone. We did not hear back before our deadline. Of course, we did request an interview with Steve Ballmer. We sent him and his people detailed questions about all of this. And we received this statement from the Clippers on behalf of Ballmer and the team, which reads in full, quote, "Neither Mr. Ballmer nor the Clippers circumvented the salary cap or engaged in any misconduct related to Aspiration. Any contrary assertion is provably false. The team ended its relationship with Aspiration years ago during the 2022-23 season when Aspiration defaulted on its obligations. Neither the Clippers nor Mr. Ballmer was aware of any improper activity by Aspiration or its co-founder until after the government instituted its investigation. The team and Mr. Ballmer stand ready to assist law enforcement in any way they can." End quote. Now, for what it's worth, I should also say that Aspiration had given a statement last year that the company, quote, "has delivered carbon credits to the Clippers over the past several years and based on ongoing obligations will continue to source and deliver credits annually through the last delivery in 2043. We take our work in the climate action category seriously," end quote. And so, Amin, by the way, here we have something that the NBA has been searching for.
If I'm the league and I'm watching this episode and I'm saying, wait, and they've got the paperwork to back it up, this feels like a paper trail that would lead you to believe that the Clippers, through Aspiration, managed to give extra compensation above and beyond what the collective bargaining agreement would allow.
It's at least a reopener.
Yeah.
With what Adam Silver said.
Well, again, let's quote it again, David. According to Athletic, he sees salary cap circumvention as a cardinal sin in the NBA and will always keep a watchful eye on that front. If any relevant evidence of improper benefits surfaces in the future, the league will reopen the investigation and pursue the charges yet again. The threat of suspension for executives was openly discussed, as was the potential for a loss of draft picks or even the voiding of player contracts as the most extreme of measures, end quote.
Now, there's a few implications right there that's quite interesting because the NBA is in a conundrum with Steve Ballmer. He has the deepest pockets. He's actually raised up the value of a lot of teams in the league, just a standard of buying an NBA team by purchasing the Clippers for $2 billion very early on. And him owning the land, just the land that was guaranteed to Steve Ballmer in 2019, that pretty much solidified that Steve Ballmer, even if he sold the team, he's still going to get checks from the NBA as they will be operating on those grounds. So even though they may not want to drop the hammer hard on Steve Ballmer, the executives and the agent tied to Kawhi Leonard, they could potentially get blackballed from the league, depending on how deep of a level was their involvement. And when their careers are on the line, who knows what kind of beans they're going to spill.
The dynamics here also, just to spell it out, this is not just any owner, David.
The thing we have to think about is the power that Ballmer has within the NBA. He's actually been very good for the league. He brings credibility to the league. He
replaced Donald Sterling.
Well, but right. Anybody could have replaced him.
But he's now sitting courtside with Barack Obama. He's the richest owner in all of sports.
That's what it is. So it's not an Adam Silver issue with Steve Ballmer. My biggest interesting point here is what other owners will take from this, because they can call on Adam Silver and say, hey, you got to look into this because this is not right.
And also, who knows how many other owners are actually upset the fact that he proved that owners should be financing the stadiums themselves and not using taxpayer dollars. Once again, the only difference between the NFL owners is that they already know this. A guy like Jerry Jones will never ever finance a stadium himself and not take taxpayers' dollars, because that's the quote-unquote hoodwink deal that he has with the other NFL owners. And Steve Ballmer, being in the NBA, he kind of broke that hoodwink deal among other owners with the Intuit Dome. The land, the stadium, even the rival stadium, the Forum, was purchased by Steve Ballmer.
Now, it's not like Ballmer's won a bunch of championships. It's not like, has he even been to an NBA Finals since he bought the team? Not at all.
The Clippers have been to the conference finals once in team history, and that was the one that happened in 2021. That was the first time they'd ever made it out of the second round, going back to even Buffalo. So this is a team that is synonymous with abject failure. That's not the part that other NBA owners, other NBA teams are envious about. What they're envious about is the massive amounts of money that they're able to throw around doing things like, because guess what, David? It's great that they built their arena from scratch, all out of pocket.
Well, it's also like Steve Ballmer is the embodiment of why you would want a salary cap.
Yes.
His spending is uncapped in all these other ways. But in this way, when it comes to the stars that are again, to pun intend this, the governor on the governor, which is what we call NBA owners now, can he get the stars? And so here we have a clue in the bankruptcy filing that we followed, that was hidden in plain sight, that got us to sign and execute paperwork, got us to Uncle Dennis, to the Aspiration logos that were supposed to be on the Clippers jerseys and all over the most sustainable arena in the world. And you get these private emails as a result showing Ballmer's personal connectedness to Aspiration. And when it comes to Kawhi, again, it's just funny when the absence of evidence becomes the evidence.
No, that's...
But that's what an endorsement deal would force us to reckon with, is that feels like clearly something, even though it's definitionally nothing.
Nothing. He didn't have to do anything.
The question to me, and this is the question that has been phrased by the 7 sources inside of Aspiration that I talked to, the former employees, was this money going on what was framed to me as a round trip? Was it starting one place, going all the way around, and surprise, it's doing what the guy who gave the money up wanted it to do to help his own interests?
Mm-hmm.
And so this all raises this second related question, which is the more serious and vast question in the real world, right? Because this question is the one that the DOJ and the FBI and the CFTC and SEC, which are all, again, looking into this deeply broken company, as my source put it, characterizing what their coworkers at Aspiration have lately been asking.
Why is Steve Ballmer backing a huge historic raise for Aspiration? Like, why? Also, what was the main motivation for such a large raise? Because from inside Aspiration, we see like the glitz and the glam of the celebrities that are posting, but from the finance side, accounts receivable were wild. Like the actual amount of money that needed to be coming in order for our revenue to count towards real revenue was astronomical in comparison to what was actually being received. There's a lot of these one-off LOIs that existed, letters of intent. There's all these one-off deals, but this proof of concept from a business perspective, at least from the finance side, did not make sense to the point where forecasting felt like casting spells.
When you look at this list, how many of those, and these are all listed as deals, letters of intent, dated as of early 2021, before Ballmer had made his big investment. How many of those are fake?
80, 90%.
They just said that 80 to 90% of the LOIs were fake?
As of early 2021, listed in the paperwork that Steve Ballmer could examine before he decided to invest or not, all of the $50 million that he put in.
Yeah, this is a little bit more than cap circumvention.
Given this special influence and the way Steve Ballmer was investing millions, but also getting paid millions via the Clipper sponsorship with the promise of an even bigger payout, by the way, if Aspiration were a real company that went public successfully to the tune of that $2.3 billion value.
They went public as a SPAC. Let that be known. They went public as a SPAC. They didn't go public like a Fortune 500 company that has real product that they sell and real revenues that they could report on. They went public as a fucking SPAC.
Valuation. What did Steve Ballmer, the very best investor of the last 20 years, know about everything else going on at Aspiration? And when did Steve Ballmer know it?
So Adam Silver on one hand, and then you've got the government on the other. The government doesn't really care about salary cap circumvention.
Correct.
At all. NBA owners, they care deeply. The federal government cares deeply if there's any sort of fraud perpetuated on a common investor.
And that is a question that the NBA and the federal government would both have some curiosity about. What this is a story that starts with a clue in a bankruptcy filing, gets us to a giant NBA scandal, and gets us back to the real world where some shit is actually at stake.
Now, finally, Pablo touched base on one of the co-founders of Aspiration running the same game, this time on the political side.
I happened to encounter the very person whose signature was right next to Kawhi Leonard on that $28 million no-show endorsement deal in the pages of the New York Times. The splashy headline this time was, quote, Democrats lay groundwork for a Project 2029.
The title is an unsubtle play on Project 2025, the independently produced right-wing agenda that Mr. Trump spent much of last year's campaign distancing himself from and much of his first few months back in power executing. They plan to roll out an agenda over the next 2 years in quarterly installments through Mr. Czerny's publication, Democracy, a Journal of Ideas. The goal is to turn it into a book, just like Project 2025, and to rally leading Democratic presidential candidates behind those ideas during the 2028 primary season. Mr. Czerny, now the president of the journal he helped create, called the assemblage the Avengers of Public Policy.
Mr. Czerny, as in Andre Czerny, co-founder and former CEO of Aspiration, whom I very much wanted to talk to, is back. He's in politics. And so last month, I tried to connect with him on LinkedIn, and he accepted.
Oh, no. Oh, my God.
I tried to start a conversation, inviting Andre to come on Pablo Torre Finds Out to discuss several things. The future of the Democratic Party, which he wants to lead. His experience working with Steve Ballmer and Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers. The last time he talked to his co-founder, Joe Sandberg, his friend from, Harvard. But I also wanted to ask Andre, why did you resign as the CEO of Aspiration in October 2022, right as, all that was really hitting the fan? And relatedly, why he ran for U.S. Congress a second time in Arizona in 2024, because what I wanted to find out was whether the company he had co-founded to fight climate change had even been planting, as Andre once proclaimed, quote,
we're planting more trees than there are in Central Park every day.
End quote. But I could not.
No chance.
He didn't respond. And when we reached out to Andre Czerny with detailed questions, Andre did not respond. But all of this is to say that I did want to pose that question to somebody, this question about the trees, and so I did.
You would have to go in order to confirm that the trees were planted. Usually you have a project manager who's providing those real-time updates. Like you would have someone physically representing the project for Aspiration in that project. Whether it was daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, at a minimum, someone would be there to confirm.
How often did Aspiration visit the sites of the tree plantings?
That's a great question. To my knowledge, out of all of the projects that Aspiration undertook for carbon offsets, there was only one site visit during my tenure.
Wait, so just to be clear, I'm looking at a spreadsheet with a zillion, approximately, projects having to do with forestation and tree plantings, and you're saying there was one site visit during your tenure there?
Yeah, to one project.
What does that say to you?
Either they're not concerned with whether or not the trees are being planted, or it's not real, or both.
Yeah, unfortunately, nonprofits, a lot of them, wealthy people just love to funnel money to friends and other people that they're trying to submit payments to for certain favors. And this is a common thing in America. It's nothing new here. Just look at the way the former president, Joe Biden, was moving around with his son on top of certain company boards receiving payments. Okay, so now Steve Ballmer, at a very unusual turn, shows up to Bristol, Connecticut at ESPN's campus, and they air an overnight interview with him defending himself and just explaining the overall situation from the Clippers side. And throughout this interview, Ballmer kind of made it seem like he wasn't aware of certain things with Aspiration. But before we get to that interview, just take a look how Steve Ballmer was singing a different tune, as he was very detailed on the partnership with Aspiration. And he is a person that was so hands-on with this overall Intuit Dome project that he knew the number of toilets, and they were even tracking how long it took fans to use the restroom, grab their food, and get to the game.
I love Intuit Dome. Since we talked a lot about products, and I've been involved in, I'll say the visioning. I don't call myself a visionary, but what should this product look like? And particularly those, that, a number of them, both Windows, but also certainly on the back-end products, back-end meaning they're not customer visible. But I would say Intuit Dome's probably the product for which I have the clearest vision I've ever had. I knew what I wanted. It evolved some because we went and looked at, a bunch of other arenas. But I had a point of view. I know what user I wanted to make happy. I wanted to make Intuit Dome the best place for the hardcore basketball fan. Toilets! 1,160 toilets and urinals! 3 times the NBA average number of toilets and urinals. We do not want people waiting in line. We want them to get back to their damn seats. Pièce de résistance, as we went through this, is when we had a chance to really sit down and meet the folks from Aspiration. To have our first founding partner be a company that focuses in on providing services to consumers and businesses to reduce or even go negative on their own carbon footprints was a great thing.
And now we'll hear from Steve Ballmer as he spoke to Ramona Shelburne at ESPN, and he sounded very nonchalant when it comes to the details of his sponsorship with Aspiration, unlike those 2 previous sound bites we just heard. And keep in mind, Steve Ballmer, outside of Microsoft, he's made his money and his name as being a guy who is a very well thought out investor. But again, in this interview, in certain circumstances, he acted very nonchalant when it comes to a partnership with a sponsor that is carrying your name brand. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
Up front, I want to say one thing very clearly. We, the Clippers, have abided by the salary cap circumvention rules because that's the right thing to do. And we have done that. I happen, for what it's worth, to think it's a very important rule in terms of promoting competitiveness and equal playing field across the league. But whether I agreed with it or not, it's the rule. And we've absolutely abided by that. We cannot pay a player anything beyond what's in his standard player contract, and we cannot cause anybody else to pay the player what's beyond their standard contract. And that would include, for example, sponsors, endorsers. that is verboten. We can't do that, and we didn't, certainly in this instance. I mean, we can have sponsors. The players can do endorsement contracts. We can do sponsorship deals with the same companies that they do endorsement contracts. We cannot have any involvement in their negotiation with the companies who sponsor them. We didn't in this case, and we never have. Let's pick up from the point about what the rules are. You say, okay, we know what the rules are. Was there an exception made in terms of our relationship with Aspiration? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is a company that I got to know, frankly, through them approaching us about a sponsorship deal. My family and I were super keen to do work to stem climate change. We think that's an important thing. I was in the process of even changing the design of Intuit Dome so that we could be carbon neutral.
Now, him right there saying that they're trying to design the stadium so they could be carbon neutral. First of all, there's nothing really about the business of operating a stadium that's ever going to be carbon neutral. You look at the amount of trucks that have to come in, load up equipment, the amount of cars that come into the arena that have to park, gas emissions, the amount of food that's wasted, the amount of trash that's created that has to somehow go somewhere. There's nothing carbon efficient or just eco-friendly about running a business with a stadium. So just this whole partnership sounds weird to me. It just sounds good on paper, but in reality, this shit don't even add up.
And then we meet this company that focuses in on an aspect of carbon neutrality. To me, it seemed like a match, kind of made in heaven, if you will. And then they offered us an unbelievable sum of money, $330 million. That by itself, one of the biggest sponsorship deals ever done. And it wasn't naming rights. We had turned them down on the naming rights deal because we liked Intuit, blah, 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 but they didn't offer even more money. So we had a fantastic deal with a company that fit with stuff we care about personally. And because I was in.
Now, him saying that they offered even more money for the naming rights, even though he rejected it, remember, if they had gone through and got the naming rights to the arena, the NBA, especially after the FTX scandal, would investigate Aspiration and how their whole operation of that organization worked.
I read their business plan. Remember, they defrauded me. They defrauded many other investors much bigger than me. But I read the business plan and said, hey, this makes sense to support them, to support us. We made an investment in the company. So all fine. I had no control over this company. That is important, actually, under the salary cap rules. I owned less than 3% of the company.
Now, that right there is very important, what he's saying right here. He owned less than 3% of the company because had he owned 5% or more, any type of transactions they had with Kawhi would actually violate the circumvention or just the CBA rules with the players. So right then and there, he's clarifying not necessarily to the everyday fan that's listening in, but to the higher ups or just the legal side to the league as far as his involvement with Aspiration, because that $50 million payment was supposed to be for that 3%. Let's listen to him say that again one more time.
We made an investment in the company. So all fine. I had no control over this company. That is important, actually, under the salary cap rules. I owned less than 3% of the company. There were investors who put in a lot more money than I did. I had no board seat. I had no control. Heck, it was a fraudulent company. It's possible nobody had any control. And now you look back and say, could I believe anything they said? Could their employees have been believing anything they said? I don't know. But at the time, it was an exciting deal for us to go do. Now, we had already signed our deal with Kawhi Leonard. We signed that in August of 21. It was a 4-year deal, 4th year at his option. It was the most that we could pay him. That was the most we could do under the rules, if you will. I've been excited about that, even though we knew Kawhi had to rehab a year from a torn ACL. So, you know, kind of okay, this is going to work. This is really going to work, and it did. all done. I remember where I was. We're very excited. That would have been August. In September, we got the deal done for sponsorship and investment. We announced that. And at that time, we hadn't even introduced, Aspiration hadn't asked, or we hadn't introduced for sure, Kawhi to Aspiration. We were done. They were done. We were done with Kawhi. We were done with Aspiration. The deals were all locked and loaded. Then they did request to be introduced to Kawhi. Under the rules, we can introduce our sponsors to our athletes. We just can't be involved.
Now, once again, just going over his timeline, November 2021 is when construction officially began for their new arena. They locked in Kawhi a few months earlier in August of 2021 for 4 years, $176 million. So just looking at November, we have construction began for the new arena. Kawhi was introduced to Aspiration. And also, when we looked at Pablo Torre's paperwork, we have Kawhi and Uncle Dennis registering that K2 Aspiration LLC, which is the same company that received the payments from the Aspiration deal, which began 4 months later in April of 2022. So the month of November in the year 2021 was very active. Construction on the new arena began. Kawhi was introduced to Aspiration, and also him alongside Uncle Dennis activated that new LLC that ended up receiving the payments on that same date. They registered it with the state of California. But the sponsorship deal with Aspiration began in April of 2022.
We made an introduction. That was in early November, well past when all of this happens. We had a chance recently to go through all of our relations with Aspiration. This is where you get to kind of how you prove this stuff. We, as part of our cooperation with the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission, we had produced text, emails. We'd already gone through all this stuff because it was part of document production in their investigations. And we even found the email that makes the first introduction. It was early November. I won't remember the exact date. So where could any of this circumvention have happened? It didn't. It couldn't have. The introduction got made, and then they were off to the races on their own. We weren't involved. I eventually learned that they had reached a deal. I have no idea what the deal was.
So, but you see how this looks to the average fan, right? You're invested in the company. It's $50 million as your investment. You're part of the biggest raise that they have as part of the whole building of that company. Then your star player gets a contract for $28 million. He's not required to do anything as part of that contract. He doesn't actually do anything to promote their company. And he signs an extension with you guys right in and around the same time. Like you can see it looks like what it looks like.
Let's talk to the fan. We signed that deal with Kawhi before any of this. Before Kawhi even knows these people. We've signed our deal. That's high integrity. We made our deal with Aspiration. Literally, I had no control over the company. Literally, even when I invested, I think there was somebody who put in 6 times as much money as I did. No control. And that's okay. The average fan should understand that. And they went off and made a deal. I don't know what the deal is. I know what the reports are with the speculation. I don't know what the deal is or was. And frankly, I can't even tell you whether it's this much different, that much different, or not different at all.
The deal ended up being not that much different than the money you gave as an investment to the company. What was originally discovered was the $28 million that was owed to Kawhi over a 4-year period. What eventually got found out that there was an additional $20 million through stock options, therefore making the total $48 million. So you wonder if Aspiration in a way acted like a clearinghouse to make sure that they was able to provide Kawhi with additional funds outside of the salary cap for a $2 million payment. That's what it looks like from the outside looking in.
From some of the other endorsement contracts that athletes do, in terms of amount, I don't know. I actually don't know the amounts of most endorsement deals, but when you look at Forbes magazine and they talk about the highest paid athletes, many of those top athletes, as Kawhi was a top athlete, is a top athlete, you read those things and they say they make more off endorsements than they do their, very large salaries. So I don't know what to expect, but I think the average fan may not either. But we did things by the book, and I don't know what those deals should look like, nor do I know what this one looked like specifically.
So why do you think they gave him that much money?
Let me just repeat, I don't know how much money they gave him.
Well, in the court documents and in Pablo's podcast, they report it was $28 million.
Pablo's podcast, I don't know anything about the court documents on this. I haven't seen them, and I don't know. I'm not trying to be, I don't know. I really don't know. But the speculation.
Hold the fuck up. You don't know nothing anymore, but you showed up to Bristol, Connecticut overnight for this interview? Come on, man. That's hard to believe.
Is what it is. And why did they do that?
It's a lot of money. I mean, $28 million, $7 million a year is a lot of money for a guy that you didn't actually require to do anything.
Wait till Ramona finds out it was really $48 million.
I don't know why they did what they did, and I don't know how different it is. I really don't. And frankly, any speculation would be crazy. These were guys who committed fraud. How would I be able? Look, they conned me.
You're one of the richest men in America.
They conned me. I made an investment in these guys thinking it was on the up and up, and they conned me. At this stage, I have no ability to predict why they might have done anything they did, let alone the specific contract with Kawhi.
I mean, you're one of the richest men in America. You've obviously done very well in your career in business. Like, you didn't smell anything wrong with the company. You didn't see anything wrong. Like, you obviously reviewed the financials before you got involved with the business proposal.
I reviewed, my staff reviewed primarily fraudulent financials. Now, should I have sniffed it out? Maybe. I feel embarrassed and kind of silly that I didn't sniff it out, but I didn't. I made the investment. A lot of other smart investors didn't sniff it out either. It's also true I've made a bunch of bad business deals and investments in my life, and I've made some good ones. This was fraud and a bad investment, and I'm embarrassed by that.
Now, once again, Steve Ballmer very nonchalant. It was a bad investment. I was defrauded. I didn't know anything. But overall, when you look at this whole Intuit Dome and just this Clipper venture for Steve Ballmer, he's been very detailed since the start. Again, for those of you that are watching the visual version, if you look at the timeline, he was able to woo back DeAndre Jordan by providing something outside of the cap. And also, he was able to land Kawhi Leonard coming off the championship from the Raptors. And also PG13, where he was coming off a season where he was voted top 3 in MVP votes. And after securing those two players at the time, especially for a franchise that was not known for winning, he was able to secure the land for the new arena in 2019. And also in March of 2020, he was able to purchase the Forum from the Knicks owner, James Dolan, and the MSG company. So Steve Ballmer has been on a mission ever since he's acquired the Clippers. And a lot of the acquisitions he was able to make, there's franchises that have been winning in the NBA for years, and they were not able to make all these moves in such a short span.
When you signed Kawhi in 2019, the NBA had an investigation that his uncle, Dennis Robertson, asked for extra benefits, whether it be use of a plane, a house, guaranteed endorsement opportunities. And at the end of that investigation, you were cleared of wrongdoing, but they left open by saying if any new information comes to light, they would reopen that. So since 2019, has Dennis Robertson asked you for any other benefits that would be in violation of the league rules?
They know the rules. They, meaning Kawhi and his representatives, including his uncle. We know the rules, and if anything's not clear, we remind ourselves what the rules are, and we make absolutely clear we're going to abide by those rules, and they understand them as well, and it's important for them to abide by them, which they have.
So you were listed as one of the largest creditors in the bankruptcy case, and you said in your statement you're looking forward to cooperating with the feds, you're looking forward to cooperating with the NBA investigation. Why? What are you looking forward to there?
Ramona, there's no paperwork that's actually tying him into paying Kawhi. There's just paperwork saying that he was an investor. This was very carefully crafted. You could even see from the way they crafted Kawhi's sponsorship deal, absolving him of any type of responsibility of even earning the money.
Well, the Clippers are actually the creditor. It's not on the investment that I am a creditor. It's on what they owed us for the sponsorship deal. And, I just lost my investment. That's what happened there. Why am I looking forward to? It's really important to me to communicate to the NBA ecosystem, but particularly our Clipper fans, that we've been on the up and up. Since the day I bought the team, and the circumstances were definitely tough, we've really emphasized doing things the right way. Doing things the right way, whether it's the way we treat our fans, our players, our staff, the rules, do things the right way. And I want our fans to really understand that they've aligned themselves, that they support an organization that does things the right way. I mean, that's fundamental. We welcome the league investigation. We have nothing to hide, and in fact, we're glad for that opportunity also to tell our story, because we think it's important, and it's important for me, for our fans to really understand that we're going to do the right stuff.
Since you signed Kawhi, and really even back to his days in San Antonio, there have been stories like this. There have been a couple of lawsuits filed. There was a lawsuit filed from a man named Johnny Wilkes, who said that he received payments for his influence there. Randy Shelton, a former trainer.
Dismissed by the court.
One of them is still ongoing, the one with Randy Shelton. I don't know why Ballmer said both of them are dismissed. Maybe he's not in the know.
The league has investigated you guys for some of these allegations. There's been issues with load management with Kawhi Leonard. There's been other issues with him. There's just a lot of smoke, right? And you say it's important to fans and for you to feel like you do it on the up and up. But you can understand why the average fan would go, okay, always with this guy. Like, why is there always these kind of stories with this guy?
I don't know. I think because he is, relatively doesn't speak much, I think there's a lot of mystery around Kawhi. And that may be why, fans kind of tell themselves, create a narrative, if you will. I've had a great relationship with Kawhi. I've gotten to know him a little bit. We sit down a couple times a year and just kind of talk about how the team's doing. The allegations, have not been true. But what's most important to me is we've done the right thing in all those interactions. And Kawhi's business is Kawhi's business, but we've always done the right thing.
Have you spoken to Kawhi about any of these allegations since the podcast came out on Wednesday?
I have not, no.
Would you be interested to see what he has to say?
It's really his business with Aspiration. So, I wouldn't ask about it, no.
If this story had come out about another team, another owner, how would you feel about it?
I'd want the league to investigate, take it seriously. Like I said earlier, the salary cap circumvention rules are important to the league, and I'd want the league to investigate.
Steve Ballmer already knows there's no paperwork legally tying him to giving Kawhi Leonard the money. And that's what it's all about, what you could prove on paper. As Paul George alluded to earlier in this segment, if it's not written on paper, you can't trust it.
And just so we're clear, you never directed anyone from Aspiration to do an endorsement deal with Kawhi Leonard?
No, I didn't. And more importantly, we, the Clippers, did not. We didn't give him direction. We made an introduction as is appropriate under the rules. A lot of sponsors do like to, they call it activate by doing something also with players. We made the introduction, and that was that.
Do you think, given this situation and other teams and the commonplace of stars doing a deal with a team sponsor, do you think the league should maybe look at that practice and maybe adjust that because of the appearance of impropriety or because of situations like this?
That would really be up to league office to think about. I mean, as the rules stand today, it would almost be disrespectful to tell a sponsor, no, I won't introduce you to that player. And it would be disrespectful to go to the player and say, yeah, somebody was interested in meeting you, but I won't tell you. The rule says we're allowed to do that. I think it's the respectful thing, actually, for us to do. And I think the system has worked well, but ultimately that's the NBA's call.
How do you the Board of Governors meeting is in a few days. How do you think your fellow owners are going to approach this?
I don't know. I hope they'll have faith and confidence in me, the folks who've gotten to know me, but I can't predict. Thanks, Ramona. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we've done, and express, I guess, some of the anger I'm feeling about what's going on. And I also feel some sadness for our employees. I'm mad, but I'm also sad that they're going through this as well as our staff and our fans.
So there you have it from Steve Ballmer, a very unusual tone when it comes to how he didn't know for such a detailed guy. He's been very hands-on throughout this whole Clippers endeavor, but yet displayed a kind of a nonchalant attitude when asked about the details. And surprisingly, after the Pablo Torre investigation, Mark Cuban had inserted himself into this whole situation. And I'm not surprised, because ever since he sold this team and Luka surprisingly got traded, he has been itching and clawing back into the spotlight. But interesting enough, he sat down with Pablo Torre and they spoke about quite a few things. Aspiration actually contacted Mark Cuban prior, and they also touched base on how these sponsorship deals really work. And keep in mind, with Mark Cuban inserting himself into this situation, the sale of the Dallas Mavericks were tied to quite a few things. His dealings with Dirk Nowitzki after the 2011 championship run, with the Lakers and the Rockets offering Dirk a $92 million deal, but him rejecting it to stay with the Mavs. Things like that start to come into question when you see incidents like this happen with the Clippers. In the NBA today, money's piling up so high that a lot of things are not coincidences anymore. Luka getting traded to the Lakers just for one first-round pick and Anthony Davis. Not only it doesn't add up, you look at the domino effect. You look at Jeannie Buss and the Lakers sale, it gets finalized just a few months afterwards. Again, with so much money on the line, a lot of these things are not coincidences. And also with the backlash the Mavericks faced with giving up Luka, they were able to secure Cooper Flagg in the first overall pick with 1% odds. So too many coincidences all at once. And it's beginning to raise a lot of red flags. But Mark Cuban sat down with Pablo Torre and tried to reinsert himself into the spotlight. And he took the position of kind of debunking Pablo's whole story. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
Thank you for doing this. It's rare that a Twitter interaction results in something like hopefully dialogue.
Yeah, I'm good for dialogue. I don't have a dog in the hunt, right? From a Mavs perspective, I hope they're cheating, right? I mean, there's no reason for me to try to defend Steve Ballmer other than for what I think is right.
What's your relationship like with Steve Ballmer?
Fine. I mean, we get along. Nothing special, nothing over the top, nothing like, hey, we do tons of trade. He's my best friend as an owner. Nothing like that at all.
I doubt it's really fine the way Mark Cuban is saying it, because that DeAndre Jordan situation, the fact that he was able to snag that player back away from you after you already agreed to a deal. And we see how you reacted to the Knicks in the Jalen Brunson situation. You did not let that go. Even though you went on numerous podcasts and said that you were not bothered by it. But the paperwork and the filing that you had with the league and their investigation says otherwise. So sometimes when Mark Cuban is talking, you got to take things with a grain of salt. And just the overall sale with the Dallas Mavericks, Cuban was throwing too many smoke screens. Oh, he still maintained control. Then you have a lot of insiders throughout the league saying him maintaining that type of power was never the deal.
So when I saw your report, right, I went up and I just searched in my email to see if they had ever sent me anything. Because I figured if they're trying to pitch Steve Ballmer, they're probably trying to pitch me. So they did. In March of 2020, they sent me an email asking if I wanted to get involved.
Who was the guy who sent the email to you?
Let me find it. Hold on.
Yeah.
3/26/2020 from Joe Sandberg with CC to Andre Cherney.
Yeah.
Mark, I co-founded Aspiration, and the Aspiration team wants to move on this with you. I've copied my co-founder. Aspiration has 1.8 million users, raised 200 million of VC, and is focused on delivering socially conscious financial services to everyday Americans. Would you like to connect by phone so we can operationalize ASAP? First, that's really aggressive, right? I mean, it was like the assumption closed, didn't even ask questions. Oh, because this was right when the pandemic hit and everything had just shut down, right? And people were trying to get money, and we were talking about making money available. And so this guy's coming in saying, we can do it, we're a bank. And I said, well, are you even a real bank?
Damn, that was a perfect time to scam. 2020 in America's history, Oh my God, so much money was moving around in just very slimy ways. And it was very institutional too.
I appreciate your desire to help. And he said, no worries. Building on my prior response, we have a bank partner that is ready to go on this. We have been finalizing a product with them. We could literally do 1 million of these $1,200 loans. First of all, a company that I've never heard of, ready to do over $1 billion in loans. Okay, that was a red flag. And that was the end of it. I never followed up with those guys, and I don't have anything else from any of them going forward.
Now, it's interesting how Mark Cuban sniffed out the bullshit and threw just an email. But Steve Ballmer looked through all their financials and he didn't sniff out anything. Very interesting.
It's just fascinating to know that he was sniffing around the NBA. Obviously, this is Joe Sandberg, by the way, who August 21st, 2025, this is the DOJ's press release. The headline is, Aspiration Partners co-founder charged and agrees to plead guilty to a $248 million scheme to defraud investors and lenders. And there's yet more, by the way, in his file with the Justice Department. The SEC is also now investigating him. All of this stuff is part of my fascination with the story. I want to get, though, to why we are doing this, because I don't expect everybody to be on Twitter following both of us. They're probably following you. What a disaster it would be for their mental health if they were following our back and forth. But the reason that I reached out to you so explicitly was you do begin your post by saying, I'm on Team Ballmer, period.
Yeah.
And I'll just read you the quote, and then you can help explain what it is that you mean. You wrote, as much as I wish they circumvented the salary cap, first, Steve isn't that dumb. If he did try to feed KL money, Kawhi Leonard money, knowing what was at stake for him personally and his team, do you think he would let the company go bankrupt, knowing all creditors would be visible to the world? They got scammed by Aspiration along with many others, crimes for which they pleaded guilty last week. Scammers do scammy things. They did a $300 million sponsorship deal with the Clippers in 2021. That's a huge deal, huge in all caps. The better the team does, the more value the sponsorship has. It actually makes perfect sense that if they stole money from investors and want the Clippers to succeed, why not give stolen money to help keep their best player, ? And then the last graph, Mark, it's sad that Pablo Torre didn't take the time to find out how these scammers pulled off their scam. The idea that the default is Ballmer is the bad guy is going to backfire on him, period.
Yeah, so the reason I'm on Team Ballmer, right, is when I go back and I looked, the deal was in 2021, before their arena opened, right? Right when Kawhi signed their new contract, and it's $300 million. When you get a deal of that size with a new category sponsor, the NBA has to approve it. So first of all, the NBA had to have looked into this. But that wasn't, the overwhelming thing. Then they defaulted on that deal, right? They stopped doing it, and Ballmer made an announcement at some point in time saying that the deal was not moving forward, and this was several years ago. But that wasn't really the trigger for Team Ballmer. The trigger for Team Ballmer was in January of 2024, when it was either the SEC or CFTC said that they were under investigation. So the minute Aspiration was under investigation, I guarantee you, in the immortal words of Charles Barkley, I guarantee it, that the NBA took a hard look at it. And not only that, that Ballmer, if he did something illicit and under the table and tried to, work around the salary cap, then he's got to be bricks, right? Because at that point in time, he's the dumbest human being on the planet, because he trusted these scammers to do something he knew was against all NBA rules. A, I just don't see that happening. B, the NBA would have found it easily.
I don't know about that. The NBA would have found it easily because Aspiration wasn't the biggest sponsor of the Clippers. So I doubt the NBA even has jurisdiction to even look into their financials outside of all the information that was made public through the bankruptcy. If it was a situation like FTX being on the Heat's arena, that might inquire them to look a little bit even further. But the league has been fooled before. And that is not even that long ago. I believe it was 2021 or 2020 with the FTX scandal. Big name players were involved in that. Tom Brady, Stephen Curry, a lot of guys put their brand at risk being associated with that fraudulent company. Even MLB, all the empires had FTX on their shirts. They got caught up in that whirlwind. 3, and this alludes to the Steve Ballmer can't be that dumb thing. I mean, I guess, and I've been scammed. Everybody's scammable. But in order for this to work, in my opinion, he has to trust that whole company.
And at that point in time, you know, he trusted them enough to give them an investment at some level, but I don't see how he would trust that company to keep probably his darkest secret as an NBA owner so that it wouldn't get out. I just don't see in any way, shape, or form that all those things could happen.
It's fascinating to probe the mind of a former NBA owner about the logic, right? And
I still own 27%, but I'm not the governor yet.
Excuse me, sir.
That's okay. I'm just playing with you. I'm playing with you. It's not that big a deal.
Part owner Cuban. The thing I wanted to ask about, though, as I probe your thinking, right? Because it's fascinating to see how you would approach this dynamic.
Right.
Because I'm thinking like, well, you know, would it be different as a calculus to you if Steve Ballmer had personally put in like $50 million and was personally helping with the business development of Aspiration with the co-founders of the company? If he was like, you know, doing that sort of a thing where he was personally helping.
I could see, what I can see happening is, okay, you're going to do a $300 million deal with us. I'll put 50 million in, right? He probably has no idea how, you know, the day-to-day operations, because in the bigger scheme of things, there's just not enough hours in the day to deal with that, right? But
let's talk about the logic of that, right? Because I think you're making sense. You're making dollars and cents now, right? So there's a $300 million incoming to the Clippers.
Right. Potentially over time, yeah.
Over 23 years, specifically.
Right.
And that's in 2021, in the fall.
That's interesting. Their deal was for $300 million over 23 years. That's about $13 million a year. I don't know if the NBA would go that crazy to investigate one of the smallest sponsors of the Clippers. $13 million a year is not that crazy of a number for a sponsor that has an affiliation with the NBA team.
If he were to put in $50 million while getting $300 back, why is that a good business decision? Just for people who don't understand this stuff, why is that a good business deal?
Well, so there's got to be more than one piece to that, right? Because it's not necessarily give 50, get 300, right? First of all, over 23 years, that's a long time. The net present value is the net present value, whatever, right? But if you're looking at it, you know, and again, do you know the date of when he invested the money? I don't.
September of 2021.
Right when they made, so right around the time they made the announcement, right?
Yes.
So keep in mind, this is 1 month after they re-signed Kawhi, and this is 2 months before they introduced Kawhi to Aspiration.
That they were going to be a partner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he gives 50. Now, what you're suggesting that there's a quid pro quo, right?
I'm suggesting that people have asked the question who used to work for the company whether there was a quid pro quo.
Of course, yeah. But at the same time, these guys were doing carbon credits. These guys are doing, you know, the ability to offset, you know, his travel, just like I bought carbon credits to offset my travel, right? So he's thinking it's a good cause, right? So that's the other thing that I'm thinking. I'm not thinking that he's saying, okay, these guys are scammers and I know they're scammers, so maybe they'll do a scam for me. That's what I see as implausible. And that part doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering about is if there had to be something else missing for why you give 50, get 300 over 23 years, right? So the math there, again, you do the math.
Well, it can't be, maybe you believed in the business. Maybe you believed in the company.
Sure.
I mean,
I think
just look at Sam Bankman-Fried, right? There's a whole lot of people that believed in him until they didn't. Now, I don't know if that's 50 million big for Steve, small for Steve, in between. I have no idea how he usually invests, but I do know that if he believed in the business of carbon credits and offsets and trees, if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
So is your theory then, because I guess I want to also just introduce something, because people who are not familiar, I'm trying to bring in as big an audience as possible who aren't steeped in the lore of the NBA, right?
Sure.
Steve Ballmer, as he has described himself, is of course a hardcore basketball fan. And so are you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like, you two are actually two of the guys I think of when it's like really rich dudes who own teams, who really care about, say, the distance between the toilets and the seats,
For sure.
right? So there is a micromanaging aspect to just
No. You're getting two things. That's not micromanaging, right? That's where we'll diverge again. So I see where you're going. You pay attention to details. If you're paying attention to details as small as how far are the toilets versus, paying attention to any $50 million investment, obviously you're going to pay attention to the details. But no, right? What I said, when I heard him talk about the number of toilets and the distance to toilets, that's just trying to optimize. And so the Ballmer, like I was on the audit committee with Ballmer, and Ballmer was the one guy who looked at numbers, right? Now you may think that's an indictment of him, right? But the reality is he's always trying to optimize. That's the way he thinks. That's the way entrepreneurs think. That's the way I think. How am I going to optimize the experience for fans? And if you're trying to spend $1.2 billion and differentiate your arena, the number of toilets and the distance and time it takes to get to them and your food, etc., is just, a metric that you use to determine, how different you're going to be. I don't think it's indicative of anything.
I want to take it beyond just the toilets.
Sure.
Because Aspiration was a founding partner of the Intuit Dome, but certainly there are sponsors of a level in which their logo's on the back of the courtside seat, right? Their signage is everywhere.
Right. You're gonna get on the jersey, whatever.
On the jersey patch, exactly right. So is there a level of familiarity with that sponsor that is not quite the same as a lesser sponsor in your experience as the owner of the Mavericks?
Yes and no. Yes, from the perspective of you're shaking their hands and taking pictures, no matter what. You're showing up at an event, no matter what, right? You're doing the things that makes your customers happy, no matter what. You taking it to I really put in the effort to know their business? Hell no. Right? Because sponsors come and sponsors go. There are some sponsors, like I just went back for the Mavs this week and we honored Coca-Cola and Budweiser and Southwest Airlines. And
But Mark, those are a bit different from the Green Bank Aspiration, those legacy brands that are very
100% different, 100% different, right? But at the same time, it's not that much different in that you're not going to all of a sudden become an expert in their business or even dig into details like you're suggesting.
Now, what if you happen to invest $50 million of your personal money into it?
I've invested millions of dollars into people I've never met.
Have you invested 50?
Not in people I haven't met, but 10 to 15. On a relative basis, it's about the same.
Man, Mark Cuban, you didn't even want to invest $50 million into Jalen Brunson when they asked you for that early extension, because that was around the price point for about 3 to 4 years. You didn't even want to do that. So I don't know about that, man. Cuban, I don't know, man. Cuban has been acting funny as of late, but maybe he's always been this way. And I mentioned the Jalen Brunson situation because he was already killing that last year in Dallas. Luka had an early season injury, so there was almost a half a month or just a 3-week stretch where Jalen Brunson was kind of doing his thing on his own. And then Luka got hurt in the playoffs, especially in that round against the Utah Jazz, where Brunson carried the Mavericks and helped them maintain a 2-1 lead until Luka came back. So the evidence was always there that Brunson was kind of doing his thing, and Cuban could have really locked him in for a discount. Once again, Cuban, ever since he sold the Mavericks, he's been throwing a lot of smoke screens, and it leaves you to wonder, what the hell is he hiding?
Point taken. Steve is a lot richer than both of us.
Yes.
But the question I'm asking is, it's not merely some sponsor, it's the thing you sort of need to assess, right? Like if Steve Ballmer is Mr. Optimization, right? I imagine what he might want to look at, for instance, is like the list of frankly, sources of business that this thing you invest $50 million into might be.
No.
You're suggesting that you would not want to...
He probably has a team that does due diligence. And the NBA has a team that does due diligence because it's a new category. And if the NBA approved it, they're probably going with it. Just like when crypto hit and we got hit, the Heat got hit because of the sponsorship and everybody questioned, crypto.com because of it. The NBA had to approve that category. Does it mean that, everybody looked into the depth of details? No, it doesn't.
I guess what you're saying is FTX happened, and that should give us a sense of how poor the vetting process from the NBA is when it comes to the sponsors that they sign with.
Yes and no, right? So let me just tell you what happens. I invest in a company and they say, Mark, can we put out a quote for the press release and everything? I'm like, go ahead and write it up. I'll approve it. unless there's something funky about it, I'm like, go for it, right? Half the time, if it's smaller investment, I don't even check. I've got people who do due diligence on these deals, like my Shark Tank deals, due diligence team comes in. Bigger deals, little bigger team comes in. What do you think? Here's my questions, get these answers. Do I go into the absolute details? No.
So I want to understand something, though, because when you're saying that Steve Ballmer, was a guy who, of course, wanted to optimize everything, wanted to recruit the best players and all of that, and you had experience, of course, doing the same thing in your own parallel way, I actually want to take us back to one of my favorite internet stories where I really did come to appreciate you on NBA Twitter as an entity, which was the chair in front of the door, DeAndre Jordan, 2015. What I loved about that was it went to the extent of showing how much everyone cared about getting these players. And so I just want to establish that as just a general principle. But you're also saying that Steve Ballmer is not the type of person who would want to bend or break the rules of cap circumvention to get such players.
Because you have to look at the risk reward. You have to look at the risk reward.
So the question I have is, what explains the fact that in that same case of DeAndre Jordan, which of course involved you with the Mavs and Steve Ballmer with the Clippers, why was Steve Ballmer's Clippers team fined $250,000 by the NBA for reportedly, offering a Lexus endorsement, arranging a Lexus endorsement, according to reporting, to DeAndre Jordan?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even remember that part happening. That part I don't even recall.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
it did happen, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying it didn't, right? That would have been dumb. Like, look, if I'm wrong on this and you're right, then Steve is not as smart as I think he is.
Well, I'm team bricks, Mark, I guess is what I'm saying here. I'm team bricks based on the reporting, right? So can I don't want to cut you off because I actually want to know what you're about to say. I just feel like a really smart guy can be so desperate to get a star player that justifies the entire mission of opening a privately funded stadium to compete with the Lakers specifically, who were competing with him. And in fact, when it comes to a bunch of scammers, who maybe he didn't know were scammers in 2021, but clearly saw them as aligned with him on, we're going to help you do what you want, to the point of him helping with business development. The whole idea of, did he have zero idea that these guys that he was dealing with on a day-to-day basis, CCing with the CEO of Intuit, according to emails that we found? Is it possible that that guy would have no idea that they were paying $28 million for a no-show job to the guy who was his most valuable employee, while there was also simultaneously in that same timeline a $300 million 23-year contract being struck between the company, Aspiration, and Steve's baby, the Los Angeles Clippers, that also had in the document that we acquired the contractual language outs at every turn for him to not do anything. And in fact, none of it was ever reported until today. You're saying that that's plausible to you?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look, the that happened at the Mavs that I had no idea was happening.
Oh yeah, we believe that, Mark. We believe that part. Because them sexual harassment lawsuits and some of the culture that was going on over there. You definitely raised your hands like you didn't have any idea what was going on, but yet you're always front and center when we see you on camera trying to act like you're the superstar player on the court. Once again, Mark Cuban, I don't know, man. He's coming across as a bullshitter.
And people didn't think that that was marginally feasible because you can't pay attention to everything and every deal that you do.
Why did Kawhi Leonard take less money, do you think?
Maybe he had that deal in hand and that was his reason. I don't know.
Because I have 7 sources that say it was to circumvent the salary cap, plus the documentation that suggests that that's exactly what happened.
Well, the documentation is the contract you're talking about that says if he no longer plays for the Clippers, right?
Yeah, among other things,
Yeah. I mean, I can make the same argument that the scammers benefit as much because of their sponsorship.
Wait, can you explain that one?
So in every huge sponsorship deal, you get tickets, you get appearances, you get all kinds of ancillary shit, right? And the better the team, the more valuable that is, right? All of our sponsors are going to want to have access to Cooper Flag. Everybody wanted access to Luka, no matter what, right? And part of us getting those bigger deals was giving people access. And so the better the team, the better the stars, the better the value of the sponsorship.
So are you in dispute at all that the deal Kawhi signed in that document, as reported, to the extent that you've seen it, that clearly was to circumvent the cap? It's merely that Ballmer was not aware of it. That's the argument that you're making then.
Right. So
who would have known about it at the Clippers then?
Who would have known? Well, wait, no, I don't think anybody knows about it necessarily at the Clippers.
Nobody would have known about the fact that Kawhi Leonard?
You're not, so my logic is different than yours. My logic, I'm putting the hat on of aspiration.
Yes.
And just the aspiration hat on, right? If I'm paying Kawhi to do something for me, even if it's a no-show Tony Soprano job, right? He's of no value to me in Dallas.
Yeah.
I can take some of that scam money that I just brought in and let me give it to Kawhi in the deal, because if Kawhi stays, they're probably going to be better. And if they're better, my sponsorship money is worth even more. There's more value to the scammers to doing this deal than there is to Ballmer for doing the Kawhi deal.
So I guess I just want to square the circle here, right? Because the team had a relationship with Aspiration that had ended as described in 22-23.
Right.
And that started in 21. The Kawhi contract also started in, the LLC was registered and the LLC was named very conveniently for my purposes, KL2 Aspire LLC in 21.
Pretty stupid, yeah.
I mean, not the most genius plan by Uncle Dennis Robertson, admittedly.
Right.
But the point is that all of that stuff was happening simultaneously.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah, please. I just don't understand how the Clippers would have no idea.
Help me with the timeline here.
Yeah.
Because I forget when Uncle Dennis was an issue and him trying to do side deals.
It's been an issue for a long time, Cuban. It's been an issue probably since he was in San Antonio, to be honest with you. The Spurs probably kept quiet about it, but ever since this reporting came out, the rumblings, they're out there.
2019, that was after Kawhi won the title with the Raptors. Yeah.
Right. So, and that was a topic at the Board of Governors meetings. I remember that. I just don't remember the years.
Can you explain what that meeting was like, actually? Because I'm fascinated as to how that goes.
Yeah, it was basically, it wasn't specific to Uncle Dennis, but he was an example. It was effectively that you have to have a specific person you're negotiating with. You have to be a registered agent in order for you to be able to agent.
When it comes to when Uncle Dennis is making calls and he's saying, I need to get paid here, which is what the source told me in the finance department. And others have said as well. He was the guy calling saying, hey, you owe us money. And
wait, Uncle Dennis is making the call, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's in the episode too.
Doesn't that say a lot? Isn't that a red flag to you?
In what way?
The fact that it's Uncle Dennis making those calls, right? It's not even plausible to you that this is a deal between Uncle Dennis and these two guys at the top.
I think the person who is most likely to have zero idea that he was under an aspiration contract was Kawhi Leonard.
Look,
I believe that also. It's a possibility. Trusted family members have been finessing these players for a long, long time. All the times we've heard about these stories of athletes going broke, there's always a small part where they talk about a trusted family member skimming some money off the top.
If your reporting is right and Steve knew, then it's over, right? It's over.
So what do you think? What do you think the punishment is that's fair? If in fact
he's toast. I mean, he's got it's far worse than Joe Smith. Now the difference is just because someone says Steve Ballmer knew doesn't mean he knew.
But what I'm saying is, when Uncle Dennis is calling to say, you owe us the $28 million for the no-show job, in so many words, right? And the sources inside of Aspiration are saying, we were instructed this is the number one priority that we have because Steve Ballmer put $50 million into the company. At the same time, we agreed to pay Kawhi 28. It just feels like as the company is collapsing and the scam is falling apart, the person you might logically attend to, according to the thinking of these sources that I spoke to, the 7 people, is the person who had the most influence over your company among those investors. I just don't see how the Clippers, at some high level, would have no idea.
So let me ask you this, and I don't remember.
Yeah.
Who was Kawhi's authorized agent?
It was Mitch Frankel.
Okay. What does Mitch Frankel say about all this?
That's a good question by Cuban, because Mitch Frankel, his license could be on the line with this whole situation.
That's a great question. Mitch has not responded to our request for comment. I should spell that out.
And it may well be that he thinks Uncle Dennis is in the middle of it and pulling it off, because Uncle Dennis is not supposed to be in the middle of any of this shit, right? Well, I guess maybe for marketing deals. For marketing deals, it could be different.
Ooh, that's interesting right there. Cuban brings up marketing deals is different. Family members could be involved, but direct deals with the teams has to be like a registered agent.
But now this is where I think the question of what punishment happens here is on a couple of different levels, right? There's like
I'm not giving in that he's guilty, that Ballmer knew this was going on, right? Again.
Oh, you're still team Ballmer.
Still, oh yeah, for sure. For sure. You haven't told me anything that makes me think otherwise.
But the contortion that you're making
no.
has
No.
Steve Ballmer.
See, I look at the contortion you're making, right? And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. Because you're not giving the scammers enough credit. That's the difference between us. You're assuming that Steve Ballmer has all the leverage and all the knowledge and all the awareness, control the circumstances. I'm telling you, if these two guys were good enough scammers to get valuations at $2 billion plus.
But Mark, can I just jump in here to say that we reported the story of the scam, and it's absurd. The scam is absurd. The scam was very simple, actually. And you know what? You reminded me of it because you mentioned FTX. We also did a story about FTX. We talked to Michael Lewis and Zeke Fox, the two authors of the Sam Bankman-Fried books. And my big takeaway was very actually resonant in our reporting on Aspiration. Here are these guys who used sports as a cosign to get credibility as good guys, such that more companies, Meta, the Red Sox, Clippers, these are all that's who Aspiration got. And they got it once they got Steve Ballmer. Okay? So Steve Ballmer putting in 50, right? The question is, why would Steve want to do that?
That's a great comeback by Pablo. And just that validation with the FTX scandal, it really was made when they secured the MLB. That attracted guys like Stephen Curry and Tom Brady to get involved and risk their brands being associated, because at the end of the day, MLB is a bigger entity and they affiliate with FTX. So Sam Bankman-Fried, he kind of went on a run where he was trying to validate himself in the marketplace. And Aspiration dealing with Ballmer kind of validated them in the marketplace in the same way. These type of scams tend to repeat themselves over and over and over.
And I think the question I keep on returning
I get the foundation of your question.
But the scam,
what's the quid pro quo for Steve?
But the scam, in terms of like why I'm not underestimating the scammers, is because what the scammers did was create a bunch of fake LLCs, fake customers, fake letters of intent that Steve Ballmer, by the way, could have assessed if he wanted to. But again, you're telling me rich guys don't need to do that at that level necessarily, even though they're Jersey Patch sponsors. It feels like it's just his responsibility as the greatest investor of the last 20 years, according to the Acquired podcast, to look at the letters of intent that you can get in the documentation, and you Google them and you say 80 to 90% of these are fake.
So this is where we disagree, right? Your presumption.
But I want to leave that. I want to give that to you. I want to give that to you. I want to give that to you, because let's say he didn't do the Googles. All I'm saying is, when it comes to why Steve Ballmer decided to do that deal and like what was going through his mind, I don't think it's a very big logical contortion to say he found somebody who would keep a deal for his most important player who he needed to pay above the salary cap to the tune of $28 million secret so successfully that he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for me. And so the scam here is not simply, man, these guys were real clever. It was also that they were very stupid. They made up these fake letters of intent, fake LLCs. It collapsed within a couple of years. And the whole thing, Mark, as you know, carbon offsets, it was, we're going to plant some trees, but we're not even going to plant them. We're going to broker it, and we're going to charge 5 to 10 times what it costs to plant a tree in the ground.
It was an arbitrage.
Yes, 5 to 10 cents for a dollar, right?
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's crazy.
Maybe that's why he invested.
Oh, so by the way, I believe that the end game there was a SPAC in which Steve Ballmer would have had the ability to, at a $2.3 billion valuation.
They did merge with the public company, right? And he would have got, so they probably told Steve, to what you just said, some new information for me, right? What they probably told Steve is, we're going to take this out in the SPAC and you'll get your money back right away when the SPAC goes public.
That was exactly part of the plan, as my reporting has indicated to me, was that there was a payday as well.
And part of that payday included Kawhi having stock ownership of 20 million. That would have played out the same way, because him being issued that much ownership in stock, by the time they went public, he could have got a nice little payout through that.
By the way, as you say, multiple reasons to get into business, but the question of, right, cap circumvention and what an owner has a responsibility to know doesn't it feel like it's his responsibility to know if the partner that he's gotten into bed with, that's on the jersey patch, on the seats, all over the building, has this side deal? Like, isn't that part of his oversight responsibilities as the owner of the team to do the due diligence?
How is he going to know?
How is it? How would he not know? Like, that's the logic here. Is like, you're sort of presuming that these guys hid it from him. And what I'm saying is that 7 sources told me, including the documentation, that everybody knew about it. And this is the question I have for you.
All your sources are inside the scam company.
Oh, but these are people who are the victims. If there are any victims in this story, it's people who thought—
The people who work there always are the victims of the scam company.
Yes, who thought
we're
trying to do good. We're the climate change people. We're like true believers about carbon offsets, which is sad now.
And they
in
got
retrospect.
scammed just as badly as everybody else.
And their question
right, but that makes my point. That makes my point, Pablo, that the scammers—
But why would but you're saying the scammers are really good at scamming. Why would the scammers tell 7 people at least, and I'm told it was dozens who are aware of this, that Steve Ballmer and Cap Circumvention is the reason we can't talk about this?
No, I get your point again. But on the flip side, if I want to shut everybody up, hey, we're saving the world. But in order to get this $50 million investment, in order for us to be able to get the value of the sponsorship, I'm going to lie to you and tell you I did this deal that Steve Ballmer's making us do these things, right? Everybody who works for us, stay focused. Don't talk to anybody about this, because if you do, that can make the whole thing fall apart.
But I feel like
I'm giving you the reason why you can't talk about it.
I feel like you're the greatest defense attorney for 2 scammers in terms of just like their
I've
thinking.
been scammed. That's why I know I've been scammed.
But Mark, I want to square the circle, as I keep on saying, like a cliche, unfortunately, of like how these guys can be smart enough to pull something off, but stupid enough to tell. Truly, in my reporting, so many people inside the company.
But see, you're missing the point.
No, because
how else do you get them to shut up? How else do you get them to shut up? And stay focused on their job.
But I think there are 2 choices. It's how else do you get them to shut up? But also, if we tell them a lie that it directly indicts the guy we're trying to keep out of the news, you've given them the recipe to tell a reporter in September of 2025.
How many of them know how the NBA CBA works?
Dude, it's not the whole.
Mark Cuban is completely avoiding the obvious questions. But also, I believe the scam was so bad that if you worked for the company, depending on your credentials and just what level you were at, they somewhat had to make you aware, because it probably didn't even make business sense of them paying Kawhi Leonard $7 million a year. It just probably didn't at all. There's people internally in the company that could see the money that's coming in versus the money that's going out. So certain questions will start to be raised.
The whole notion of cap circumvention is not especially complicated as a concept.
It's not. It's easy.
Exactly. So the whole idea of like, the reason it's a secret is because we're paying Kawhi outside the cap.
If you hadn't told me Uncle Dennis was the one to make the call, I would have been more likely to believe that Steve was at fault.
Wait a minute. So let's dig in on that. So why is that?
Because if Steve knew, and the minute he found out that this was falling apart and these guys were a scam, he'd say, let me invest some more money so you can pay off Kawhi so this whole thing goes away and there's no evidence of it any longer, and let's just erase all this from the books. You don't leave this outstanding debt out there. And particularly once you see that they're on a path to going broke, and potentially you understand enough, and I think we've all had enough experiences with bankruptcies, that those creditors are going to become public. And because that's where you got the story, right? And so that's, the whole due diligence, smart enough to know, right? It applies to that as well. He's leaving himself so wide open in a way that he's going to be smart enough not to be if he's truly breaking the rules. If Ballmer was involved and he just immediately square the circle, to use your term, the minute things went sour, he's a fucking moron.
You're saying save Aspiration personally to prevent bankruptcy, to prevent all of this stuff.
That's one option. Or invest more money, right? And just tell them to pay off Kawhi. Because it would have made no sense to do this on an annual basis. It would have made a lot more sense to pay it off, put it away, nobody knows any better.
The question I would ask you, though, would your calculation of throwing another $50 million after your original $50 million change if you became perhaps suspicious, if not aware, that one of these men was going to be pleading guilty to wire fraud.
He knows he's f***ed at that point,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
If he knows they're committing to wire fraud, he knows they're f***ed. So I'm doing everything possible. I'm going to Uncle Dennis and I'm saying, check written. Well, that's the next question, right? As a correspondent and an investigative journalist
That's right.
from Indiana University Powell School of Journalism, right? Why wouldn't Ballmer just go, or a representative thereof, just go to Uncle Dennis and say, Uncle Dennis, forget those guys. Here's $30 million for you to get aspiration amnesia and just make this go away.
Oh,
and
you
just
want
tell them,
you want SEC style. You want SEC
well, no,
paper bag
SEC's
full of
already
money.
investigating. He already knows.
No,
the
sorry,
SEC
I
is
meant
investigating.
Southeastern Conference football style.
Oh, there you
like
go. Yeah,
booster,
yeah. Oh,
booster paper bag. But that's what you're saying is directly pay Uncle Dennis.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's risk reward. If he was dumb enough to go down this path in the first place, at that point, he's got to keep on digging.
Yeah. I mean, look, logically, now we're completely in agreement. I think some dumb shit happened after some dumb shit happened. I mean,
What
that's my
you're
suspicion.
suggesting, yeah, all suspicion, right? All allegations, right? But I just don't think that he's just going to, you know what? I'm up. Let's just see where it goes and may the chips fall where they may.
But I think that the chips falling almost happened behind closed doors that no one saw. The question of, was there going to be someone who was obsessed with bankruptcy filing documents like me who would go through the trouble?
No, you're giving yourself, you get credit for doing it, but you're giving yourself too much credit.
No. But the point is, why didn't anybody else find it? I'm not saying that I'm great. I'm just saying that nobody else
besides the
found
point.
it.
So one of us has got to be right, one of us is wrong, right? Either team
I'm
Ballmer.
I'm team bricks once again.
Okay, so team bricks or team Ballmer, right? I just think if it's team Ballmer, he didn't know, and all this is going on, and that's why there was no response. You're saying that it's all falling apart anyways, and everybody's bricks, and they're going to do nothing.
I think they didn't have moves to make with Aspiration because there was criminal activity that has now been revealed in DOJ and SEC investigations.
Remember what I just said, right? It's Uncle Dennis, right? Or his representative.
So with moves to make with Aspiration. So let's just put Aspiration to the side. So the question is, what timeline are we living? I believe we're in a timeline in which Steve Ballmer knew, according to the reporting, the 7 sources plus the documents that provide the context, that Steve Ballmer...
But all those sources and all those documents are internal to Aspiration only, correct?
And I believe that they are the most credible people for the reasons I said.
No, exact opposite.
No.
Exact opposite.
If I were to tell you that the questions about why does this deal exist preceded 2022, would that change your level of belief in Team Bricks?
No, because it doesn't.
Why?
Provide any confirmation that Steve knew anything.
But it happened before there was a need to spin.
So, like I said, the scammers, Uncle Dennis goes to the scammers and says, not knowing they're scammers at the time, say, hey, you just signed this $300 million deal with the Clippers. Who's the best player on the Clippers? Who represents the Clippers the best? Who's going to be here long after they're gone? Work with me. Let's do a deal with Kawhi. And if Kawhi's going to play, whatever. He's not going to show up and hug trees. He's not going to show up and talk about.
He's not going to do anything.
Offset.
Literally anything. He's not going to hit. He's not going to hit a fave on Twitter.
Yep, which he doesn't do a lot of anyway, but that's beside the point. That Uncle Dennis is negotiating. That's still not proof that Ballmer knew.
But Mark, what I'm saying is the reason I trust these people is because when I interviewed them and I asked them about this bankruptcy filing, this LLC, they said immediately, oh, it's for this reason. And then I said, can we prove it? And they said, yeah. There's a document. And I said, can I have the document? They said to me, here it is.
That's the contract with
the contract,
KL2, right?
the $28 million contract in which none of the jobs were contractually obligated in terms of deliverables on the KPIs. The KPIs were just play for the Clippers, which again, established. The point being that their knowledge of this and their providing of it was substantiated by documentation, emails, bank statements, other sources, 7 of them, 7.
None of which connects Steve Ballmer.
Yeah, it's not going to really connect Steve Ballmer, but at the end of the day, Cuban, it's implied that this is cap circumvention. It's fairly obvious, but Cuban still part of that NBA ownership group, which he says he still owns about 27% of the Mavs, which everyone in a way should take it with a grain of salt because he's been real shaky on the details of him selling that team. But on the legal side, there's no paperwork that's going to directly tie Ballmer to giving Kawhi money outside of the NBA salary. But in the game of optics, yeah, this shit looks real, real bad.
They all connect Steve Ballmer. They say it was cap circumvention at the direction of the most important investor in our company who put $50 million in.
And who did that email come from?
Wait, which email?
The one saying this was at the direction of, it's cap circumvention at the direction of them.
That was what they were told. They were not stupid enough to put it in emails.
Okay, so who told them? Was it Sandberg?
When I say it was common knowledge at the company, I think there are two ways to see it. One is, wow, the scammers perpetrated a plan that was so deliberate that it handcuffed people from going to anybody and saying anything because they needed to protect Steve Ballmer. And that's why they were, zip, can't talk about it, right? The other thing that's possible here, though, is that these guys ran a scam that was so messy that it got shot down within 2 years, 3 years if generous. And they didn't really consider this. And that, like,
yeah, but that still doesn't implicate Steve Ballmer.
But it does. But really, now we're talking about is the credibility of the 7 people I spoke to, plus the documentation they provided.
No, it really comes down to the credibility of the people who told them.
But the point is that when they say this, in the light of day, it all adds up with reality. And what they said is not, you know what, we were lied to. It's, this is the only thing that makes sense. It's the only thing.
I get that too. It does. It's the only thing that makes sense.
It's the Occam's razor, Mark.
Not even close. Not even close.
You're suggesting, okay, look, what you're suggesting here is that these scammers made it so that they were smart enough to tell these rank and file employees that, hey, don't tell anybody because it's Ballmer. But they were stupid enough to not realize that one day they would actually tell me, a journalist, exactly what they were told.
Every Ponzi scheme falls apart at some point, right? Every single one of them. Madoff went for how many years? And all those people who worked for him, all of them, down to the computer programmers who programmed the false statements that got sent out to the owner of the Mets at the time, right? And all the other victims that they had.
Right.
Everybody has to fall in line. They don't all think they're working for a scammer. A couple of them know, but they're all told that Bernie Madoff is making 15% a year, risk-free. So to look, you had people in the Bernie Madoff case, to go back to how your logic, who are smart investors, including, people who are some of the, at the time, biggest investors with the most money,
of
right?
Course.
And they got scammed, right? Unknowingly, they trusted people. Maybe maybe Bill Clinton told Steve Ballmer, right, that these guys are legit. So I'll tell you a quick story, right? There's a guy that I competed with 40 years ago with my company, Micro Solutions. This guy was good, really, really good, great technologist. He contacts me 30 years later and he says, I'm putting together this company. I do some due diligence, but I trusted him, just at best trusted him. All a scam. Now in this case, I lost $8 million, right? I'd done basic due diligence, but it was underpinned on the trust and the references that I got. I had no idea. And all this technology stuff, he would tell me I had to deal with this company and this company and this company, and his employees believed him. His family believed him. I believed him. So when I keep on going back and say, some scammers may be good, but all Ponzi schemes fail at some point. And when those Ponzi schemes start to falter, that's when things start to come to light. And again, I haven't heard anything that takes me off of Team Ballmer. I think that, there's a lot of uncertainty. I just don't see it.
But this is really where I'm driving to, because what I presented you with is an owner who wants to win very badly, just like you did. An owner who has so much more money to spend than he's allowed to spend, which is pretty unique to him. Not that you're not very wealthy, Mark, and not that
no, I hear you. It's okay.
You made it rain.
He's got a lot more money than me.
Those padded seats courtside was
right.
I got
it done, baby.
Incredible thing. But what I'm saying though is that
nobody else put microphones on the rims until me.
You are a pioneer. A pioneer.
Yes. Yep. In the rim world, I'm in the Hall of Fame.
Oh God, what a sentence.
Take that back. Yeah,
I was gonna say we're gonna
say that. Cut that out.
we digress. I've given you this story of an owner who is those things, who also in 2015 went head to head with you for DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah, and got fined.
Fined $250,000 for trying to arrange a side endorsement deal with Lexus and was told you can't do that. And so now 2019 comes around and all these other owners in the NBA at the Board of Governors meeting, which you said you attended, are saying, this Uncle Dennis guy, who you personally have experienced, pleading with you, give me some stuff, right? That guy...
It wasn't quite like that, but he contacted us.
Okay, yeah, okay, fair. But the point being that there was an investigation by the league specifically around side deals, endorsement side deals, that resulted in the changing of the rules, right?
Yeah.
And so that's 2019. And so then we get to 2021, and Steve Ballmer, right, having acquired Kawhi Leonard, needs to figure out in this extension that he signs Kawhi Leonard to, and this is, I think, a key detail that maybe we've sort of underplayed. He signs Kawhi Leonard to a deal that was mysterious at the time to the people who had no idea about this story, but we're just covering it from an NBA perspective. Neither the shortest nor the longest extension available. He signed a deal that was convenient to the Clippers. 4 years, $176.3 million in 2021.
How much was that short of the max? How much was that short of the max?
It was a max. It was just that he restrained the ceiling on available money because he didn't go as long or as short as he could have. And so the question then is...
But he didn't really give up any money. He gave up optionality.
Optionality to align his contract with Paul George's with the Clippers, right? Which is something that was very helpful, as covered, by the way, at the time. Mark,
okay.
I mean, but you know...
But there's no equivalency.
He signed...
It's not like he gave up $7 million.
Kawhi Leonard wanted maximum money at all times. But the point being is, that same time, this guy who had previously gotten in trouble in the way with DeAndre Jordan, head-to-head with you, and also was investigated by the NBA for specifically this reason, has this deal with a sponsor who says to him, you know what, we should give you $300 million as your founding partner of this arena. And also, guess what, Steve? You should give us 50 of your own. And simultaneous to that, in this timeline, 2021 fall.
I get.
But I'm just saying, you are sort of contorting this.
But why 28? Why 28 million?
It's just, by the way, less than 50, which you put in. Like the sources inside of Aspiration.
Why 7 million a year? Why 7 million a year?
By the way, fair market value when it comes to cap circumvention, you mentioned that this is bigger than Joe Smith, unprecedented in that way. It's because it's a big number. It's like, why? Why would they do that?
Oh, no. Cap circumvention doesn't matter about the number. It's just that you do it. The number is irrelevant. It's just the fact that you would do it.
But okay, so in that regard, when Steve Ballmer tried to sign DeAndre Jordan to that deal and got fined $250, doesn't that feel like an important detail when calculating, are you team Ballmer or are you team bricks?
Yeah, but I would take the other side saying you learn really quick. Right. And the NBA, when they fine you to $250, so the process as an expert in being fined, there's negotiations that go on and there's discussions that go on. And you talk to the NBA general counsel and they lay it out to you exactly what the risk factors are. And they're not shy to say, if you do this again, the circumstances will be far worse.
So what if...
And let me remind you of this again. And they will remind you
totally
over and over and over again. So I look at that as, hey, that was the warning, and that increased the risk profile for doing this even more.
So what if there was a way, though, where you could sign somebody to an endorsement deal in which no one ever had to know about it?
No NBA owner is dumb enough to think that, at least I don't think so.
But he did it already against you for DeAndre Jordan.
No, I get that, and he hopefully learned his lesson.
Why would you assume that this man who...
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck is up with Cuban right here. He just assumes the best for Ballmer every single time. Maybe he got an under-the-table deal. Who knows?
In the face of all the evidence I've given you, Mark, as I assess team bricks
but
versus
I
team
tell you,
Ballmer.
in face of all the evidence I've given you on the party he is dealing with.
I dare say that you provided zero evidence and more just logic based on how you would have done things. And you seem to have this perspective that is so conveniently generous to the 6th or 7th richest guy in the world. And not the reality of how this story has unfolded.
And it's crazy Cuban is talking like that because just as Pablo has stated, Ballmer actually prevented Mark Cuban from signing DeAndre Jordan. So what the fuck is making him be so convenient in defending Ballmer?
what do you think when FTX hit, right? What do you think all those people, well, there's a market. You could see what they did. They sold everything that they could, right, to liquidate, but they reacted. You don't think, you think he just did nothing?
But I think they also hid. They also hoped nothing would happen.
Yeah, but see, okay, that's the thing right there. They hoped nothing would happen. That's where we vehemently disagree. You think they hoped nothing would happen, and they did nothing, crossed their fingers, crossed their toes, right? Said a prayer and said, please, Lord, let none of this come out until Pablo finds it. I just don't see that happening.
I think what happened was, in the timeline that we outlined, per my reporting, at a certain point, it becomes obvious Aspiration can't pay its bills.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're beginning to worry, right? You're saying, oh
Right.
no.
Team their pants, right?
Bricks. They bricks even.
Yeah.
And then what happens is you realize, or begin to deduce, maybe you do some due diligence now, finally, about like, wait a minute, what are we in here? And this is generous to Steve Ballmer because it indicates that he wasn't aware of the scam, right? So I'm just taking this as face value. Just like in this timeline, what he's doing is realizing the government is looming. The investigations are coming. Criminality is afoot.
We saw that in 2024.
Yes, in January 2024, that's when the Clippers kind of denounced that $300 million 23-year deal that they had with Aspiration. They kind of took it off the table. And this is as that organization goes through their investigation from the feds.
Exactly. And at that point, what you do with Aspiration is a question you're going to have to answer to the federal government. And so you're not going to put in, as you suggested before, $50 million.
No, that's where we disagree. Yeah, that's where we disagree.
You think he would put in extra $50 million and give it to a criminal?
Or just a company that's being investigated by the feds. Makes no fucking sense. But Cuban right here trying to calculate and fucking defend it still.
Well, at that point in time, he's probably, because he doesn't know for sure. There's been many, many companies. So, okay.
When do you treat Steve Ballmer like a really smart adult? When is that going to happen, Mark?
No, I just know my experiences, right? Having invested in companies.
Are you treating him like Mr. Magoo? I'm like, this guy.
No, you have never been through this. I have.
No.
You have never been through this.
I have not, but at a certain point, when you realize your bills aren't getting paid and you realize that the government is looming.
Well, you don't know in 2022 or 2023, you don't know the government's looming.
To 2024.
Let me give you my experiences, Pablo.
It's just, yeah, please.
Okay, so I've had companies where I believe in the company and weren't operated the right way, change the CEO, right? Give them more money. Some have worked, some haven't worked. That's just the way it goes, right? And so haven't paid their bills. I get the calls because I'm the rich guy behind them. I had another one of my scams, right? There's two big ones where I got scammed. He's selling shares in the company saying you're gonna get paid back. And I have no idea, right? Guy ended up going to jail. I covered all of those things. So when he made all these lied to all these companies and took money from them, I made them whole, right? That because I just felt it was the right thing to do. But I still got scammed. And when I found out, I had the choice of giving them more money to keep them alive, which I did because I felt bad for the employees, and I paid off the people who got scammed on the outside. He does have that choice. He could have put more money in. Now, come January of 2024, probably not, right? Probably at that point in time, maybe a little earlier because they probably contacted him. And even then, they said that the team was not under any investigation. But at that point in time, don't you think he would try to cover all his bases and tie up any loose ends in any way he could?
If I thought that I'd given $50 million to a guy you were at least vaguely concerned was going to go to jail, I would not
But he's
give
not
him...
thinking you're going to jail in 2022, 2023.
But when the radar starts blinking, right, as one of literally Steve
January of
Ballmer...
2024, let's just say November of 2023.
Let's say that for now. And what I'm saying is, if you're Steve Ballmer, and again, I am not you or Steve Ballmer, and I really need to express that as well, because I'm not the guy who was called the greatest investor of the last 20 years, as Steve Ballmer has been because of what he did with Microsoft.
You're using that as a way to justify your position.
No, but it's a part of his expertise to know that when the bills aren't getting paid, what's happening. And you would get
that's a big part of your argument, Pablo. That doesn't hold up.
But you're
right?
but I get that.
So Pablo,
I get you're saying
so
that
if he's
there's
worth
a human.
$100 billion, if he's worth $100 billion, what? Let's just say it was $50 billion back then, and so it's 1% of his net worth.
But Mark, what if it was the company you agreed to put on your jersey? Once you suspect it's happening to you, do you put your head in the ground, or do you try to be preemptive to protect your own team, which, as you said, is the most important thing, multi-billion-dollar asset?
And so who's the linchpin in this whole scam from the Clippers' perspective? Who is the linchpin in everything?
Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer put in $50 million, got out 300, is said by 7 sources to have been the reason. There's documentation, there are emails, he's doing business development for this company.
Uncle Dennis is the linchpin. He's the fulcrum. So if you really have your franchise at risk, and you know this guy, and according to you, he knew about this, he knew about the 28 million, and at this point in time, there's only 7 million left to go. You know, you have Uncle Dennis saying, where's the rest of my money? Don't you just take care of it because it's a de minimis amount relative to the risk?
Not if, and this is, I want to read Bloomberg here, Mark, because I want to give some of the reporting that had been done before me some credit here. This is what they say. By early 2022, Aspiration accountants had uncovered a series of payments that sent a wave of panic through the company's executive suite. And they go on to outline the ways in which, quote, some Aspiration staffers worried that a company official might be orchestrating fake transactions to inflate its numbers. Staffers were digging into the company. The sources, in fact, that I spoke to, these are the people that I trust.
The times I told you I was scammed, when I asked for reports from the CEOs of those companies, the scammers, you think they told me the truth?
What I'm saying, though, is that here are a number of people in the finance department who were, in fact, the reason why Aspiration was revealed to be the scam. The people you're saying might have been lied to by the scammers are the ones who caught the scammers.
Right.
Let's just do the hypothetical here, because you're not gonna budge off of Team Ballmer, and I'm not gonna budge off of my reporting.
And that's what makes the market.
And that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's great.
Yeah.
But if, in fact...
But Cuban right here is still not admitting, like, Aspiration's whole finance department is kind of letting it be known that Kawhi's contract is sort of not only hindering the company, but the whole shit is kind of a fraud. Cuban has no response for that part. He's been avoiding it throughout this whole interview.
My reporting proves out to be correct.
And he knows, then it's go Mavs. Great, this is great. You know, it's in all my personal interest.
What about, though, the Clippers front office, right? I guess what I'm trying to say is, if in fact someone had to know from the Clippers, right? It wasn't binary. It wasn't no one from the Clippers knew.
No, there's a good chance that it'd be only the owner at that point in time.
Okay.
Lawrence Frank has been through it forever. If he did tell Lawrence and the assistant GMs, they're too. Their careers are toast. Absolute toast. And there's a 99% chance that at some point it comes out, you know, as they try to protect their career. That's one. 2, the agent is going to be in deep as well if it ever comes out. And the agent has got to be involved at some level. And so the agent, I don't know what other clients they have, if any, but they're too. And so you've got a multi-billion-dollar franchise at risk. You've got the general manager's job. You've got the agent's job. You've got Uncle Dennis, who has no leverage whatsoever.
Well, he has the relationship with the most important person in this entire story.
Yeah,
right.
And so does
Kawhi
every
Leonard.
parent. So does every uncle, and so does every friend.
But Mark, you know that Uncle Dennis
and he also knows, and Ballmer also knows that A, Ballmer is under a microscope for 2015, and B, Uncle Dennis is under a microscope as well.
But now I just want to fill in the reality, not to interrupt because I don't want to be rude, but like Uncle Dennis was, of course, subject of the investigation in 2019. And so what he's doing now, in reality, of course, is literally be the designated rep on a deal for Kawhi Leonard for $28 million. That is at the very least something that has now, by the way, did you see the Shams thing that just came out as we were talking?
No.
The NBA is investigating.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so but the point is that that's because Uncle Dennis had this deal. So the question of Uncle Dennis, should he know better? Clearly, he didn't know better enough.
I got no problem with Uncle Dennis. Uncle Dennis is the smart one in all of this.
I think mileage varies on that scouting report.
I don't know about that. Uncle Dennis seemed really pressed to get his money. How the hell did he file that LLC as soon as Steve Ballmer introduced Kawhi to Aspiration? And then the deal had started 5 months later in April. Uncle Dennis's name is even included in the sponsorship contract.
But I take it at face value as well. He's doing...
Well, no, look, Uncle Dennis, who has no leverage anywhere, shape, or form.
But Mark,
right?
you know that the leverage is in the player. The player is the scarcest commodity here, right?
They are and they aren't, right? Because the home team has the edge. It's rare, unless you're
I feel like you're trying to give a pep talk to Steve Ballmer in 2021.
No,
I cannot do this.
One way or the other.
But you're
I
giving...
hope I'm wrong. The Mavs part of me hopes I'm wrong.
But I understand your point of view.
The former owner and the logic and everything I've dealt with as a business person, investor, entrepreneur, and owner tells me you're wrong.
But it's because you can't imagine personally doing this.
No, it's not even that. I look at it, it's just math, right? I look at the math and the leverage, and I don't see the value proposition anywhere. Your whole premise is based on the fact that Kawhi Leonard will take advice from Uncle Dennis and do effectively whatever is in the interest more of Uncle Dennis than of Kawhi.
Well, but hold on, but that part, right? We know Kawhi Leonard is a frugal person. He wants to maximize his earnings, saves every penny, gas guzzler. So legendary in that regard. So
Which makes him lovable.
By the way, he's a capitalist. Kawhi Leonard wants to get paid. Kawhi Leonard to me is
nearly as bad. Look, I don't know Uncle Dennis really at all, and so all of this is me presumption and allegations and all this.
He won't answer my call, so I'm just going based on what
I'm just saying
the reporting is.
Uncle Dennis is the winner in all of this because the CBA rules don't apply to him.
Right.
At all. Right? Whatever he can go in and negotiate is money in his pocket that he did not have yesterday.
So now you're team Uncle Dennis now.
I'm team Uncle Dennis is the smartest one in all of this. Let me ask you a question. Is it conceivable that Uncle Dennis played a stronger hand and basically bluffed and said, I control Kawhi? And I've heard this from many different relatives, friends, except this is my boy. I grew up with him, right? I raised him, whatever it may be. And he overplays it and he goes to Aspiration. He says, I'm going to get him out of here, and unless you pay me $28 million and your whole sponsorship ain't worth it.
I believe that it's even likelier that that deal happens, but with the blessing of the team that has a $300 million deal with the company that agrees to it.
No.
But Mark, but again, the reason I say that is because I have done all the reporting. I'm not just saying that as a guess.
But your whole reporting, Papa, you get credit. You picked up a needle in a haystack, right? You found a needle in the haystack and you turned it into something real. It comes down to who initiated that contract. Was it the agent and Uncle Dennis is just trying to collect? Was it the Clippers and they're just huge idiots? Or was it Uncle Dennis acting on his own, freelancing? I would bet on option 3.
I guess what I'm saying is two things. The ultimate leverage in the NBA historically has been a superstar threatening to leave a place in which he can extract in exchange all sorts of stuff. Now, typically, when we say that, it's within the legal bounds of the CBA, right? Mm-hmm. The Kawhi Leonard story since 2019 has been circumvention. That's the allegation.
No. There was a story. The story is not the same as the facts.
No. But the story of Kawhi Leonard and this investigation by the NBA, as alleged by your colleagues in the NBA who dealt with him personally, was that this guy is coming to us asking for shares of ownership, and more even pressingly, these side endorsement deals, these sweeteners that are off the books.
No, I get what he asked for. There's a lot, and I'm telling you, Pablo, that happens all the time. It's just like this guy asked for ownership, and that's what made it ridiculous.
What I would return to, though, as an NBA fan and a journalist, is the actual timeline of Steve Ballmer owning the Clippers, right? So he wanted the cornerstone, the franchise superstar of a caliber that was going to do the thing that no one had done for the Clippers, which was compete actually with the Lakers. And so the guy who emerges in 2019, fresh off a championship, who looks like, by the way, when healthy, the greatest player in the league as a two-way concern, right? That's Kawhi Leonard's actual legend as a basketball player. He's incredible.
When healthy is a big if.
No question. But in 2019, he had just won the title and he was healthy, and Steve Ballmer had the opportunity to do the rarest of things, right? Get a free agent franchise player in his prime, which does not happen.
And how did he do that? And what did he give up to do that?
He gave up everything.
5 number ones, was it? Was it 5 number ones?
It was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was not...
Shai, we didn't know was Shai, right?
In fairness. But basically, and this is, I think, the point I want to drive at, and you just took me there. He did whatever Kawhi Leonard's camp was saying he had to do. That was the story of that offseason, you recall, right? He wanted Paul George.
So if what you're saying is that wasn't enough, and he'd go to any length to do anything, but only for Kawhi, I'm not going down that road.
Man, it's fairly obvious that that is the case. Kawhi and PG13 were a package deal, always, until Steve Ballmer and the Clippers let it be known, giving Paul George a lot of runaround when it came to his renegotiations in 2023.
Oh, no. I'm saying that he clearly knew the importance, because he's an NBA fan, of how you need a true number one superstar to contend.
Yeah, for sure.
And he got the guy, and he gave him, in reality, whatever was requested by the camp, Paul George, draft picks, all that stuff. He made it happen, right? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, 5 first-rounders, your memory's good, plus 2 pick swaps going to OKC, right? At the time, this was all very clearly, Kawhi wanted to make this happen, and Steve Ballmer was happy to do it.
Yeah, yep.
Absolutely. And so the question then is, given that kind of mindset, hyper-competitive, by the way.
I get your point, right?
But
where do you
also,
stop? I get your point. Where do you stop, right? I get it.
Exactly. And what I'm saying is, the reason I keep on going back to your experience with DeAndre Jordan, to 2019,
I get it.
to 2021, is because it's
pattern
all
of behavior. I get the
a pattern
of
behavior.
I get it.
And also, we're seeing that it's very important for these franchises in these major metro areas, these secondary franchise. I would say the Clippers in LA, the Brooklyn Nets in New York City. 2 things that they both have in common is that when they initially got new arenas in those areas, the owners of those teams made sure that they had relevant superstars playing. At the time, the Brooklyn Nets was owned by a Russian billionaire. He went out and got the Boston Celtics look-alike team with Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. And he paired them up with De'Aaron Williams of the Nets. So they made sure that that team was relevant. They sacrificed a lot of draft picks. And Steve Ballmer, he secured the land. He paid for the stadium himself. And he also paid an inflated price of $2 billion for the Clippers originally. This is before all the NBA teams now have a $1 billion evaluation. So he didn't spend all this money for the Clippers to be irrelevant. And him going all out to making sure that they have some of the best stars on their team, it's not far-fetched.
And you're suggesting that at some point he got scared straight by 2019, despite the fact that he got what he wanted, and for some reason stopped acting like that.
If the catalyst is Uncle Dennis, I couldn't think of anything dumber, right? Because you're going to the very person that required Board of Governor meetings and follow-ups to send a message. This is not applicable. This is a problem. And I get your point.
You're desperate. You're desperate to keep this player.
I just don't think it was a binary set of circumstances like that. I just don't see it. Like I said before, I think it's far more likely that Uncle Dennis was the catalyst with the crooks. And I just don't think you can just presume that everything with Aspiration, the crooked company, is the equivalent of a legit company.
Mark, I don't think I could possibly convince you any better than I've tried repeatedly.
And vice versa.
And I appreciate
to me, it's so point blank obvious that, look, both of us could be wrong. Neither of us, one of us could be right. We'll find out over time. I just can't see him going in that direction. I just don't.
Cuban is giving off that vibe. I'm a billionaire. I've experienced this. You haven't been on this level. You should take what I say as God. But Pablo Torre, shout out to him. He spent 7 months doing research on this and he brought it to light. And it's got a lot of people in NBA circles scrambling. But right here, he gives insight to the true amount of money that Kawhi Leonard was owed within the sponsorship deal, which totaled out to be $48 million.
Well, according to this reporting by the Boston Sports Journal, quote, the $28 million deal was not the only compensation Leonard received. According to a high-level source, Leonard also cut a side deal with Aspiration to receive an additional $20 million in company stock. The stock was to be paid out from Sandberg's personal holdings in the company over 4 years. That brought the total of promised compensation to Leonard to $48 million. Around the same time as the Leonard deal, Aspiration was going through its rounds of fundraising, which included a $50 million investment from Ballmer. That investment has been characterized to Boston Sports Journal as having been made with light to no diligence. Think of it as getting a commitment on Shark Tank after only a couple of questions. End quote.
So once you tie in the fact that Kawhi Leonard's sponsorship deal was really for $48 million, it changes the whole trajectory of the conversation. But there'll definitely be more to this story as Adam Silver will meet with the owners, ironically, in just a few days after this had broken out. And things will get tricky because Steve Ballmer has increased the valuations for almost every team throughout the NBA. He's been good for business, and even if he sold the Clippers, he'll still be getting a check from the NBA. He is the sole land owner. But we'll see how it plays out. There'll definitely be a part 2 to this, I'm sure. But in the meantime, you fellas definitely hit up the link in the description below. Check out the playlist with more NBA stories just like this. And until next time, peace.